Haven't done many streams, of course. All right, so apparently we're live here. Got the Entertainah next to me. I have Will, goes by 27 on Twitter. I'm sure most of you know both of these guys here, of course, and hopefully we get a good amount of people in the stream. Should be a good discussion because Will and Chris here are not really too familiar with each other. They know of each other, haven't had many conversations, so I'm kind of interested to see how this goes, and I'll kind of just kick it to both you guys and get opinions here. But how we doing, guys? We'll start with Chris. What's up?
Hey, man, I had to take a couple of days off from making YouTube videos the last couple of days because I've been beaten down as a New York Giant fan the last couple of days. And I'm like, I need to take about a 3 or 4 day break because it's been that last game was just brutal with all the injuries and off to a 1-4 start. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And, some of the guys that hopefully will play this week. Looks like Jones may play. We'll see about the rest. But tough start for the Giants. But other than that, man, I've been resting and relaxing this week and try not to stress out too much about the New York Giants. Hopefully they surprise me this week and get a win.
Yeah, it's hard not to stress about what's going on with just everything right now, especially with the Giants. It's not the start that I think any of us had envisioned. Even the fans that are not as optimistic like myself did not expect a 1-4 start. So it's not looking good for us right now. But Will, what's up? How you doing tonight? And Will is frozen.
Will is frozen. I
will try to fix that. I don't know if it's on my end. His end.
I think I kind of moved.
He might be back.
Cut out for a second. Okay,
you're good now.
You with me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So I think Chris and I are going to agree on some stuff, and I think we're going to disagree on some stuff. So I'll get us on on the right foot. And I'll say that I'm going to take the complete opposite take. I've kind of just been hitting my stride with producing content in the last couple of weeks. As some of the audience might know. I've hosted a couple Twitter spaces the last few weeks, including last night. Had the chance to talk with all sorts of Giants fans. Carl Banks gave his opinion, which was one of the coolest opinions of my life as, what is it now, 26 years and counting Giants fan. But, obviously I'm, share everybody's, disappointment with the start of the season, disgust and, really, the empty pit in our stomach a little bit about the injuries last week. But, I don't think necessarily we're as bad as we've been in the past in terms of the short and long-term future. So, at least we've got that.
Yeah, we're not totally screwed. I don't feel like I did a few years ago here, but I just feel like when you're in this, you have to compete for the playoffs type of scenario, which was 2021 for us. It's just not looking that way so far. And our schedule lightens up in the second half. They play the Raiders coming up soon. They play Carolina. Winnable games, in my opinion, here. But they have to be somewhat flawless in the second half to really make a push for the playoffs, especially with the way Dallas is playing right now. And I just don't know if that team's going to stop. Like, I feel like Dallas right now is probably a 10-plus win team. I don't see the Giants as that right now, at least. Maybe something crazy will happen. But, just going forward, maybe there's a chance at the wild card. Of course, some other teams in the NFC are kind of maybe going to slow down, like Seattle, for instance, losing Russell Wilson. Don't know if Geno Smith can carry that team there. We'll find out. But maybe a door opens for that third wild card spot. I don't know. But just right now, I'm not feeling as confident as I was, back in early September about this team.
Yeah, I mean, how could you? I mean, going into the year, I had us for 9 wins going into the year, and I know I was probably a little bit more optimistic than most, but I thought we'd get off to a 2-1 start. I looked at the Atlanta Falcons. I thought that was a game that we absolutely should win, and I thought we'd find a way to split between Washington and Denver. And when that didn't happen, we got off to an 0-3 start. We beat the Saints. That gave me a little bit of hope. And now this past – see, if we lost to Dallas, but we stayed healthy, and it was a relatively competitive game – which I think it would have been, honestly, had our offense not gotten completely decimated by injuries. I do think we would have kept that relatively close. I still think Dallas would have won. I would have had more confidence going into this week, and I would have said to myself, okay, maybe I could sell myself on finding a way to beat the LA Rams, an upset at home if Barkley was still healthy, Galladay was still, so on and so forth. But with all those guys out, I mean, I'd be lying to people if I told them that I expect us to win this week. Had they gotten off to a 2-4 start, that's what I had us starting. I had us starting 2-4 before the year started. I had us losing 3 straight to the Saints, the Cowboys, and the Rams. And then I had us finishing really strongly, like you said, with the weaker part of our schedule. Listen, if we could find a way to win this game, maybe I'll have a little bit of hope on whether or not we could make, I guess, a late run to potentially compete for that 7th spot in the wild card. But right now, realistically speaking, I just don't see it. As far as Dallas goes, I've looked at their upcoming schedule. They're going to win at least 11 games. I mean, they play a really soft schedule. And they're a good football team. So the division to me is out of hand. maybe, like you said, the 7th wild card's in play if we could really start to get things cooking here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll say that obviously I think the 1-4 start's disappointing, and I think what you hit the nail on the head, that the Atlanta game was the real game that I penciled as what should have been a win. I'll say that I actually predicted an upset over the Saints, so I did have that one right, but I'm not sure I agree with you about the Dallas game, even if we stayed healthy. And I frankly think it's almost a little chicken or the egg, because I feel like it was such an uphill battle that we're trying to make plays that teams in a comfortable situation aren't trying to make, like Jones trying to make something on that 3rd down where he ends up, ending up with a concussion. I don't think necessarily if the Giants feel comfortable punching it down on 4th and inches, he necessarily feels like he has to take that route and try to do it all himself. But I completely agree with what you're saying about the end of the schedule being a lot softer and setting up some potential. I'm concerned about this week. I think there are 2 coaches this week that have a whole lot to prove. Sean McVay, his father was fired by the Giants, I believe, once upon a time, but he was also shut down last year against the Giants. I think that was 17-9 in that night game. But Patrick Graham got the better of him, and I feel like McVay is going to come back with something to prove. And then Patrick Graham on the other side of when it's their offense against our defense has a lot to prove. Obviously, the Giants' defense is underwhelmed. I was pretty on record expecting a little bit of regression, particularly from Bradbury and kind of Williams, but I didn't expect things to look this bad. I didn't expect the defense to look like such a weakness. And when I talked about why I didn't have the same optimism about the Cowboys game as I had about the Saints game, I felt like we went into the Saints game with nothing to lose. And I felt like when we went into the Cowboys game, we almost had everything to win. It was like, okay, we're 1-3. We get this win. We're right back in the division. I feel like, we're not going into that being able to play as loose as we were going into the Saints game. And I just think, given how experienced these guys are, and, most of these guys don't really know each other and haven't played with each other, I thought it was just going to be a much, much unlikelier way that we'd be able to come out on top. I think we've got a little bit of nothing to lose again going into this game. I'm concerned about Jones playing when I'm not sure if he's, when I'm concerned if one big hit could have real lasting long-term impact. But I think that it certainly could be a 20-point game, but it could be something that's decided by the final possession.
Yeah, I always think back to that game when we played them last year and it was close, of course, in LA, but I always go back to that 2017 game where they completely quit on McAdoo and we lost 52-17, whatever that score was. And that kind of gets in my head. I believe, yeah. 51-17. It was crazy, but I don't think it'll be that bad, but I do kind of feel like when we don't expect the Giants to win, that's kind of when they play their best games. And I don't really think I've encountered anybody as much of Giants content as I see and all you guys see of anyone actually picking the Giants to win this game. I know there were a couple with the Saints, you included, Will, but I have not seen really anyone pick the Giants to even come within 3-2, just win this game in general. I feel like this is a spot where maybe the Giants would shock us and do something crazy. But yeah, I definitely fear for the worst because they even have 10 days rest. We kind of forget that. They played on Thursday night in a big division matchup. And, I looked at the Rams schedule even. They don't have a look-ahead spot. Sometimes these good teams and these big spread games kind of have that look-ahead mentality where, okay, we play a much easier team. We could look ahead to next week. But the Rams, I think, play some of the worst teams in football coming up. After us, they play Houston, I believe, and they play the Lions. So it's it's not going to get much more difficult on their schedule. Sure, the Lions have been competitive, but still, I feel like the Giants might be the best team out of that bunch. So I don't fear the look-ahead spot thing for the Rams. So that's kind of a concern of mine as well. I just, hoping for the best. And I guess we'll talk about, guys, the whole Daniel Jones, should he play thing. Now, as far as I know, you can't further injure yourself if you're cleared from a concussion. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think that's the case.
I want to address that because I know that narrative's been discussed on social media, and I think you're right. But for what it's worth, when I was in high school and I played JV hockey very poorly, I had a concussion going into our game against our rival, and I was cleared 3 days beforehand. And as a high schooler, they said, okay, now you have to wait 10 days before you can play again. And I think that's because my brain is still developing as, I was a 16 or 17-year-old, and the impact of a risk is greater. But in my gut, and like you, I'm not a medical guy, I'm a numbers guy, but But in my gut, I just think the more time he has, the better it is. And I will say that from what I understand, Jones was actually cleared on the sideline of the Dallas game, and
Really?
that's what I've heard that rumor.
I
And
heard that as well. Yeah,
I
I heard that
understand
as well.
he was reading on the flight home, and he told he told friends after the game that he felt fine like himself. Um, so I do think that Jones, as far as Jones thinks, like if I'm Daniel Jones right now, I really think that Daniel Jones thinks he can play, but I hope there's that, we talked about, this all summer with Saquon Barkley's return, that we're worried about his long-term future. And I think, some of us aren't really sure that Saquon Barkley has a long-term future with the Giants. And if we're worried about Saquon's long-term future, I think it's really, really important to be worried about Jones's long-term future. And I just think that this is not something you can mess around with. And we've seen it a little bit with Shepard, but I want the Giants to be as conservative as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's
I
your
mean,
thoughts, Chris? Go ahead.
yeah, what I'll say about Jones is if he's cleared medically, it's not like last year where he had that injury that I thought the Giants rushed him back before they should have. You could clearly tell that he wasn't nearly the player that he was in terms of his physical ability. They probably should have waited another week. There's no doubt about it. And he was kind of limping back to the huddle up in the third quarter of that football game. If he's cleared medically by the doctors, I see no problem in putting Daniel Jones out there. Now, to speak to your point about them having, I guess, being cautious about his long-term future with the New York Giants, the best way to do that is to teach Daniel Jones. And in that scenario, I understand it. You're on the 1 yard line. You're trying to score the touchdown. He has to do a much better job, though, overall of avoiding contact and not lowering the shoulder and taking these hits. But if he's cleared to go and the doctors say that there's no lingering effects, I see no problem with him playing this week. But he definitely needs to change his style of play, because if he continues to take hits like that, Daniel Jones is not going to last. He's just not. You can't continue to take hits in the way that he is doing it. You look at other quarterbacks that run, and I know they got a baseball background, but Kyler Murray, he's great at avoiding contact. Same thing with Russell Wilson. Daniel Jones cannot continue to take the hits in the method in which he has and expect to have a long-term successful career in the NFL. It's just not going to happen.
Nothing makes your point better than RG3 story, in his rookie year. And, obviously it was different than a concussion, but he played when he probably shouldn't have in the playoff game, stayed on the field way too long. And he was really never right after that. And I obviously a concussion is very different than a muscle tear or a bone injury or anything like that. But I think every point you're making is great, especially the fact that Jones needs to learn how to protect himself.
I completely agree with that. I think a lot of people in the offseason kind of talked about Daniel Jones and compared him to some of the better rushing quarterbacks in football. And while I've always acknowledged he's very fast in a straight line, the thing I've always said about Daniel Jones is he's not going to make many guys miss with the lateral ability. That's something he has kind of lacked in his game. Now, we weren't drafting him to be that guy. Like, Daniel Jones was not drafted to be like this Lamar Jackson type dude that could just make guys miss. But at the same time, when you were supposed to be the franchise quarterback of a football team, especially the Giants, like, you're not going to last, as you guys mentioned, with that type of play style. I'm not saying he's like reckless, but at the same time, he's taking too many hits, and he has kind of this ability to not get away from the big hit. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but he has taken some in his career. We've seen the injuries he had. I think he missed 2 or 3 games in his rookie year, missed some games last year with the hamstring and ankle.
Green Bay.
Yes, exactly.
I forgot I think it was the Cardinal
game.
Bengals, rather. He got hurt.
That's where he got hurt. Yeah.
And this week as well. So it's all when he's tried to run the football. And I guess and I know that's part of his skill set. And I've actually been a guy that has said that we need to try to utilize his legs because that's one of the strengths that he has. But he has to be able to know when to get out of bounds, know when to get down. And like I said, on the 1 yard line, that's a completely different scenario. I understand what he was trying to do there. You're trying to get a touchdown. It was just kind of a fluke scenario where it just resulted in an injury. But overall, he's got to get much, much better in that aspect. If he's going to survive in the NFL, I'm a big Daniel Jones fan. I think Daniel Jones could be a really good quarterback for the New York Giants. I've seen a lot of growth from him. I think even last year, about the 7 or 8 game mark, I started to see some growth in terms of his pre-snap reads and things of that nature. And this year he's looked really good. But at the end of the day, if he's missing 2-3 games every year, the New York Giants are going to have to think long and hard about whether or not he's going to warrant a second contract because the best ability is availability.
Yeah, we've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're again. You're hitting on a lot that I agree with. One thing that Jones is, I think Jones's intangible or his attribute that's impressed me the most is his toughness, and he's taking over from a quarterback, a Giants quarterback whose toughness is legendary, Eli Manning, and we're seeing both of these guys show their toughness in very different ways. Eli was the Iron Man who wouldn't miss a snap. Jones is the guy who's willing to put himself at risk. And obviously, the more you're going to put yourself at risk, the more games you're going to end up missing. And it's a trade off. And as somebody who for years was saying no disrespect to Eli, but the Giants really need to be at their best. The Giants need a quarterback who can pick up some first downs with his feet. And seeing that ability in Jones is a fantastic boom. So we're talking about how Jones needs to protect himself better. But the other piece of this and the play he got hurt is there was, I think the play has been one of the most shared plays of Giants football in the last, several years. But there was a real miscommunication on that play. And there were a couple of guys who really didn't understand what Jones was trying to do. And I do think that Jones had a read option where he was planning on giving the ball, and most people were expecting the ball to get to Devontae Booker's hands. But clearly that got blown up, and Jones decided to take it himself. But if you've got a tight end there who's a veteran, he's got to know that he's either holding his block or he's running deep and giving Jones a way to dump the ball and get rid of the hit. But no, he didn't have the help he needed on that play. So it's a play where he has to improve, but it's a play where a lot of the Giants have to improve, from players to coaches.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I mean, there was actually people sharing that play and saying, "Oh, Daniel Jones should have thrown the ball to Kyle Rudolph." I don't know about that. Now, was the throw possible? I guess, but you're also having to throw across your body in a way and make an accurate throw to Rudolph, and it's very risky, of course, in traffic.
But if Rudolph cuts deep into like the back
corner
towards the sideline, then at least the defenders have to make a decision.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. I mean, we'll talk about Rudolph in a second, but back to Jones real quick. He's like Daniel Jones isn't stupid. He knows that maybe his Giants career is kind of on the line this year. Daniel Jones probably knows the guy who drafted him, Dave Gettleman, unless things really change around here. He's probably gone. So he has to impress all the executives around the NFL, the next guy that takes that job. Daniel Jones realized there's like a clock ticking in his head. We only get so many of these games in the NFL. And if Daniel Jones is missing games and kind of playing to that narrative of, oh, he could be possibly injury prone, Daniel Jones knows that in his mind. So I do think Daniel Jones would, even if he wasn't feeling right mentally, is going to try and rush himself back to be like, oh, crap, I have to go out there and show that I can play, that I'm available, and prove I'm a franchise quarterback. I don't think he wants to miss games. Obviously, no player wants to miss games. But in his case specifically, he can't be missing games because he still has to prove he's the franchise quarterback of this team, a team that may have a high draft pick next year and could be possibly, looking for a quarterback or trade for somebody else if Daniel Jones proves to miss more games or not be the guy. So I do think there's added pressure in this scenario for him.
That's fair. But I do think I'm not a doctor again, but I do think with the protocols and what they make all these guys go through after they have concussions, if he's able to play, I'm confident that he should be out on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt about the Arizona game last year.
But that was like a real injury. This to me is, I don't know. It's a little bit different for me.
Well, I understand, and I think that's a nuance, certainly to consider. But we talked about this a little bit last night. But I think there's a real case to be made that Sterling Shepard has come back from concussions before he probably should have in the past. So I'm not going to say I know better than anybody who has an front row seat and who's actually seen some of the tests, which I have not. And even if I had, I wouldn't know how to read them. But I'm not going to say that just because he's cleared, I'm confident that they're making the right decision. I think that there have been too many red flags in that.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, but anyway, I want to get to Rudolph real quickly. I mean, I'm sure we'll do some bashing of how the Giants have built their team in recent years. But just to start with Kyle Rudolph, I mean, I don't know what you guys expected from Rudolph. I thought expecting prime Rudolph was kind of, just asking for too much and being a bit too optimistic. But I expected Kyle Rudolph to at least come in here, be that competent, actual, just a general tight end that we see around the NFL. Like Evan Engram is more of this like new age, new school type guy who runs the 4-4 and whatnot, freak athlete. But like Kyle Rudolph is known more of that big blocking guy, red zone option, kind of like, just what Kevin Boss was for years. Of course, he was better than Boss in his career, but just, stuff like that. So when we signed Kyle Rudolph, I'm sure fans had these thoughts that Kyle Rudolph could actually be a big help for this team, especially in the red zone where the Giants struggled mightily last year. I don't know. Do you guys think it's the injury? Is the guy kind of just taking checks and not really caring? Because we've seen instances where I think the play that really pissed me off was when he kind of got in there late on that play where Tony threw the punch and got knocked out of the game. I think Kyle Rudolph came in there and kind of pushed the pile. And then as Kadarius Toney has 5 Cowboys guys surrounding him, he kind of just walks away from the play. What type of teammate is that? I'm not saying he has to know what's going on behind him, but if Kyle Rudolph's going to start it, you at least got to stand up for your teammates. So I don't know if it's the guy's injured, washed up, doesn't care. I don't know. Where do you guys think, what's wrong with Kyle Rudolph right now?
Yeah, I don't want to say he doesn't care. I'm not in that locker room. I can't say that for sure. Obviously, it wasn't good optics when you saw Kadarius Toney and they got into the brawl. Maybe because Rudolph kind of had his back to the play, so maybe you could at least make an argument Rudolph didn't know what was going on. But in terms of his play on the field, yeah, it's been underwhelming. I'm not going to say that I expected him to be an all-pro tight end. I thought it was a fine signing. It's really only a 1-year commitment. You could cut him at the end of the year and only take a $2 million dead cap hit. But could that money have been better utilized somewhere else? Definitely. Whether that meant keeping Kevin Zeitler, whether that meant putting that towards Dalvin Tomlinson, you could certainly make a case. And the main reason why we brought in Kyle Rudolph, at least in my opinion, was for the red zone. Last year, the New York Giants were horrible in the red zone. We were 31st in the National Football League. This year, we're 30th. 40% of the time we're scoring when we get in the red zone. And I think Jones I don't think he has a red zone pass yet for a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Maybe there's one. I don't think he does, though. I don't think he had the long touchdown pass to Shepard. He had the long touchdown pass to Ross.
Yeah.
He had the long touchdown pass to Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
And what was his fourth? I can't remember. I don't think he has a red zone touchdown.
Oh, Slayton, right? Left sideline. That was the far throw.
Yeah, so he has not thrown a red zone touchdown yet. And that's where I really thought that Rudolph was going to help this team offensively. And, of course, as a blocker. But, yeah, he's been underwhelming. Maybe some of that has to do with the injury that he had preseason. But and maybe he doesn't have too much chemistry with his quarterback. I don't know. But obviously, so far, it does not look like the best of signings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so last summer after Rudolph was released by the Vikings, Zach Rosenblatt, who's one of the newer beat writers, but actually, in my opinion, certainly one of the better ones, tweeted, "All right, Giants fans, is there one free agent signing that you absolutely don't want?"
Devontae Booker.
I've got a little bit of a reputation for being, a little negative, so I didn't want to jump into something that I didn't think made any sense, because at the time when Rudolph was signed, we had Evan Engram under contract, we had Caden Smith, and we'd also decided to bring back Levine Toilolo, who had also underwhelmed as a reserve tight end, but he ended up getting hurt. But he was still, we didn't know that at the time, and so I would have listed Kyle Rudolph because I thought Kyle Rudolph would have been like a Jonathan Stewart-esque signing, and a guy who had built a name for himself, had built a reputation for himself, kind of was liked by coaches, but at the same time he was there for what he had done, not what he had yet to do. And on top of that, so on top of not necessarily thinking that Rudolph offered the most and really didn't fit, the Giants, in terms of quantity, have more skill position players than they can really fit on the field. So I was talking about this a little bit last night, but you really have about up to 500% of snaps for skill position players, because there are 5 skill position players on the team. So 100, if you have 5 guys each getting 100%, there are like 500% essentially total to go around. So Barkley, say he gets like 90%, Booker gets another 10%. Maybe they even, get on the field a little bit, but even forget that. That's 100% right there. You got Shepard and Golladay. You got each of them getting about 70% of snaps. I think that's a fairly reasonable expectation, or something like that. That's another, $140. Then you add guys like Slayton, Ross, Tony to the mix. You're probably getting at least 2.5, positions out of there. So you're already at about 350% of the roster. Then you have Engram probably getting more than, you're just running out of snaps for this guy in the first place. So it doesn't, and that's not even including the plays where you're going to include a 6th offensive lineman. So I didn't even see where he necessarily would fit. And I just don't think, first of all, he's good. We had the chance where we knew that his injury was more severe than the Giants were understood, and they decided not to use that information to their advantage whatsoever. And I do think he's still healing from that. But I genuinely think that he's proved what he has to prove. And you compare him to a guy like Caden Smith, who I need to still earn my roster spot and potentially my next contract if I'm not going to be here next week or something like that. And I think that, Smith is the attitude you want much more than Rudolph's. And so I was viscerally against the signing. I was viscerally bearish on the output of the player, but and I was very disappointed as much as everybody else was as with the game last week. But that being said, you got to give the guy credit for recovering that fumble against the Saints. And It's not just being in the right place at the right time. There are veteran instincts that go into that. And Rich Seubert for the Giants, towards the end of his career, he had a knack for falling on fumbles and making himself in position to bail the team out. And Rudolph did something right on that play. So as much as I don't think that him being on the team is the best thing in the short-term and long-term interest for the roster, it's not a complete net negative. And I do think that needs to be acknowledged.
What I will say about your 500% point, and overall I agree with you. It doesn't look like a good signing right now. I don't think it's catastrophic because, like I said, you could cut him at the end of the year, and it's only a 1-year commitment, and you're not really cutting too much in the next year's cap space. But obviously not a good signing. But what I will say about the 500% point, depth is very important with this wide receiving core and these weapons in general, right? You got Saquon Barkley coming off the ACL tear. Sterling Shepard misses 3 or 4 games every single year. Kenny Golladay missed 11 games the previous year. Evan Ingram misses usually 3 or 4 games a year. I know he stayed healthy the year before. So you could at least make an argument that it was important to have strong depth at that position, just in terms of the weapons in general. But I do agree with you that Caden Smith, I agree with you. Caden Smith, to me, is just as, I guess, capable of being a strong second tight end as Kyle Rudolph is. So it doesn't look like a great signing right now.
Like, Will, you just want a guy basically that has something to prove, right? So is where you're coming from in that situation.
Well, I think Chris's point, is very legit. Depth is important, and you see that, as Andrew Thomas gets hurt and the line doesn't really know how to collect itself. But Andrew Berry with the Cleveland Browns as at the top of his list of rules for how to build a roster, don't overpay for depth. And especially when the team, in my opinion, wasn't necessarily ready to be win now. I know that a lot of fans were excited about win now, but I feel like a lot of the win now excitement was just like, okay, we've lost, we've done our time, but we didn't necessarily lose the right way to be able to be in a win now situation. So, I'm not going to disagree and say that depth doesn't matter. But I don't think Rudolph's was enough of an upgrade over Smith or even a healthy Toilolo or even, a guy like Hikutami, towards the bottom of the roster to be worth that price point. And then, what we're talking about here with what's he trying to prove right now? The 2017, I don't think wins the Super Bowl without a guy like Sam Madison, who's at the end of his career on the roster. But the Giants the Giants aren't at the stage where it's, okay, we're one guy who can fill a hole for us and make us a little better. It's okay, now that we have Kyle Rudolph, we can do something that we haven't done before, and that takes time to develop. And with what he's got left, I never saw a way that it was really going to be worth it.
Yeah,
I can agree with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we do see veteran guys on competitive Super Bowl teams. Who was that guy we had in our secondary? I think it might have been the 2011 Super Bowl. Was it Leon Hall? Whatever the hell.
No, Leon Hall was 2016. I think you're talking about Deion Grant.
Deion Grant. That's right. The guy who faked the injury against the Rams. But that was another guy who just steps in there and can I think Dave Gettleman, that's right up his alley, is just bringing in guys. Even when the Panthers made that 2015 Super Bowl, they brought in Jared Allen, they brought in Charles Tillman, they brought in Cortland Finnegan. They had so many
Charles Tillman was on that team.
Yeah, I mean, they had so many just big name guys towards the end of their career, but I think Dave really wanted to build that way because the Panthers actually had a good ass team. It's going to work in that situation. My concern is when you sign a Kyle Rudolph type guy who had a decade long, really great run with the Vikings and only played for one team. When you come to the Giants, in your early 30s, coming off an injury, the team starts 1-4. Does it pop in your head of do I really? I'm not gonna say do I care anymore, but is it worth putting everything on the line, knowing that I have another half of my life down the road and family stuff to take care of? Like, are you making more business decisions rather than playing like, I really want to win as badly as this 23-year-old on, a rookie contract? Like, that stuff kind of crosses my mind, but it doesn't cross my mind if you're a competitive team. It only happens when you are in the basement of your division and this one-win team that the Giants are right now.
The only thing where I could at least make an argument as to why they signed him was for the red zone. Because they were so bad in the red zone the previous year. He was a sure-handed tight end that was known to thrive in the red zone. I think he had 8 red zone touchdowns in 2019, and I think that's the main reason why they brought him in. But I don't think it was worth the money that they paid him.
If that's the case, I'd rather just sign like Ricky Seals-Jones or something.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That, right?
I agree.
Teams, Kyle Rudolph was a real Viking. The Vikings, appreciated what Rudolph contributed there. And there have been really now 3 cases where Dave Gettleman has signed a free agent who has been a longtime veteran and, had a real presence on a roster. But the team decided, okay, at this point, the savings for cutting this guy is worth more than what this guy can add. And then you take that savings that the team decided was worth more than the team had, and Dave Gettleman has given, 3 contracts bigger than the team saved in getting rid of these guys. And those 3 examples are Kyle Rudolph, Antoine Buffet, and Jonathan Stewart. And we can look at all 3 of those signings and look at how they played out. And we can, I think, all very strongly agree that maybe Buffet, was able to fill in.
The Buffet one, I'm not going to kill him because that was like $2 million a year. But they
were all about $3 million. But at the same time, as a very general rule of thumb, if a team decides that it's worth more to save X, you shouldn't pay somebody more than X to start over. I think
the Stewart one, I completely agree. The Stewart one, the only thing that made any sense was that they wanted to ease Barkley in or have a veteran mentor, but I think they paid him like $3.5-4 million, whatever they paid him.
It was basically $3.5 million. Yeah, on day one of free agency, the whole process about it made no sense. And we talk about building the culture, and the way that the culture is going to get disrupted is if guys see Kyle Rudolph not getting involved and having their back. Guys are trying to turn this culture around, and they're trying to make this team and bust their ass to make this team. And Jonathan Stewart's there to collect a paycheck, and he fumbles in preseason. And then a reporter says, "Okay, are you worried at all about how you're doing?" And he shrugs and says, "Whatever, it's preseason." That's not how you change a culture around. And I was against some of these signings from the beginning, and I would look for reasons to get rid of them. But these are things that people need to consider. Like, the players are, I said this last night, the players are not stupid. And if we see a guy who's basically there on a scholarship because, or like a museum artifact, the players see it too. And it doesn't build the team that, that I think we all want to see.
Yeah, I'm sure a guy like Caden Smith is probably watching that and saying, I can't play over this guy. Like, I'm sure they have that type of, thoughts run through their head, especially when that guy's in your position group. But anyway, let's answer this question real quick. Kind of like a comment here from Mr. Slickback. Kind of reminds me, have you guys watched the movie Norbit or no? It kind of reminds me of one of the pimps from that movie.
I did.
It's the same picture or not.
Eddie Murphy?
It is. Eddie Murphy plays like 3 characters.
Why would you watch that based off the reviews? Oh my God.
No, I don't know. I think my parents made me watch it. It was funny though. It's a great movie.
It's good. I've never seen it.
It was funny to me. So older vets might be getting tired of Judge, in my opinion. Like, do you guys see any of Joe Judge kind of wearing out these players, or are we still kind of in that? Like, I think the honeymoon stage is over. This was the year to win, of course, with Joe Judge, and some ex-players on social media, I forget the names of the guys, I'm sure you guys know, but some guys were ex-players speaking out against Joe Judge. Jeff Schwartz, for sure, were speaking out against Judge and saying there's no way.
Jeff Schwartz had a roster spot. I don't know if we could call him an ex-player.
That was the only high-profile offensive lineman that Jerry really signed in free agency. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, not the best.
But no, going back to the point about the older vets, I don't want to say that yet. I know fans are looking to pile on Judge right now because, and rightfully so, he's made a lot of questionable decisions the first 2 or 3 weeks, and I know some fans want to move on from him. I'm not at that point yet. I don't love the job he's done so far, but I don't think the team has quit on him. And maybe that's not what you're trying to get at with that comment there. But I think last week's game in particular shows that they're not looking to quit on him. I thought the team fought all the way until the end. They were just outmatched by a much better opponent. And after all their players went down with injuries, They knew they didn't have much of it. We knew actually as fans, they didn't have much of a chance at all. But I do think the team tried to compete. Now, is that something I worry about as the season progresses? Absolutely. If this team continues to lose game after game after game, it's much harder to come into work. And I think because, I actually mentioned this in my last video like 3 days ago. When you look at all these signings that we've made this year, Adoree Jackson, you're not going to be able to trade, or, not that he's been okay for us so far, but you're not going to be able to trade him. You're not going to be able to trade Leonard Williams. You're not going to be able to trade Kenny Golladay. You're not going to be able to trade Sterling Shepard because of the money that they make. And if they do want to do a rebuild, it's going to kind of prevent them from really doing a full rebuild next year. And those veterans that are going to be coming back are not going to be happy if this is not a much improved team next year, if the team struggles this year. So the Giants are kind of in a really tough spot right now, where at the end of this year, if they win 4 or 5 games, are they going to decide, to try to push forward with the pieces they already have? Or I don't know. It's going to be a really tough situation for the New York Giants. But I don't think the vets are quitting on Judge yet. I will say if the team is really bad, that's something that I'll worry about as the season progresses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot here. I don't, I think that the concern is that people would see through Judge's quote unquote act and say that he's not somebody who is, he's not necessarily being authentic. He's doing things to kind of fit a tough guy act. And I don't think that's the case. I think Judge makes all of his decisions deliberately, and he acts in a way because he believes that's the best way to get the most out of his players, not because he wants to emulate somebody and he's trying to fill a role. I mean, I think Ben McAdoo in 2017, especially with that haircut, was trying to fill a role. And
he should have stuck with the mushroom haircut, man.
Yeah,
man. People talk about the boat. It was the haircut, not the boat. But I don't think that Judge is going to lose the locker room. I think that Judge's players really do like him and believe in him. I do think that Gettleman has done has plays a role in creating these issues in the locker room. And I talked about the Kyle Rudolph signing, for example, which I don't necessarily see how that makes sense. And we talked about Golden Tate in the past, and Nate Solder being a starter, and guys who are kind of stuck on the roster, like you're talking about, like Adoree and Kenny Golladay might be. And we're talking about how to rebuild the roster, and as we've kind of looking back, I think there's a lot of credence to the argument that basically Gettleman should have been fired a long time ago. And essentially, instead of rebuilding this by basically saying, all right, you're lying down, get back up. It's now we're lying down, and we had about 12 people pile onto a pile, and now we've got to get back up. And it's, getting rid of these Kenny Galladays and Adoree Jackson. And by the way, when I say getting rid of them, I think Kenny Golladay and Adoree Jackson both were overpaid, but I think they both are overpaid in a very different way than 2018. I feel like in 2018, we kind of overpaid museum artifacts, but I feel like Kenny Golladay and Adoree Jackson can still develop as players, get better, and be a part of a winning team. And I think that is a difference that's worth acknowledging. But I think there's some real questions in the locker room right now. And I think that, that's not just a judge question. And the last point of that is, I don't think that year 2 for Judge should have the expectations that year 2 has had. And that's because of a lot of the aggressive spending that I don't necessarily think the team was ready to do.
Yeah, I understood the aggressive spending specifically at Kenny Golladay because Daniel Jones was entering year 3, and you need to try to take advantage of that rookie contract while you could do it. So I'm not going to completely kill them in terms of signing Adoree Jackson and Kenny Golladay this past offseason. I thought that was kind of the missing link to their defense, that second strong cornerback. I thought that would help improve the defense. Obviously has not worked out. And I thought by adding Kenny Golladay that, you would get Daniel Jones as number 1 option. That so far hasn't really worked out outside of the Rams game either, but I'm not going to kill them for those signings. I'm not. I got to be fair. I like the signings when they made them, so I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say I will not destroy them for that. I do think that the Rudolph signing is at least questionable. Deciding not to bring back Kevin Zeitler is questionable. Signing Logan Ryan, who I absolutely love. I think he's one of the best leaders of this team. I think that money could have been better spent elsewhere, if I'm being completely honest.
And that's actually a great point that I wanted to make. I think Logan Ryan is a tremendous influence on the locker room. But when I talk about Gettleman's role in potentially,
I think that's more Judge, honestly, than Gettleman with Logan Ryan.
No, I think you're right. I think Judge is the one who says, okay, Logan Ryan's a priority. But Gettleman's the one who needs to have the job and say, okay, well, then we have 3 safeties. We just drafted McKinney. Jabril Peppers will ultimately be phased out. we've got to do something about him before he, decides to be unhappy with a limited role as a limited player. And I think that is, not necessarily a judge decision, but you can't really expect to have three guys playing every snap at safety without people ultimately getting worn down. And it almost repeats what happened with Landon Collins, because in 2018, I was and I don't know if either of you were really that vocal back then, but I was talking about my concern that Landon Collins was basically, he and his agent, if I saw the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to be a long-term part of the Giants, that he and his agent saw the same thing. And if he's supposed to be the captain and he doesn't really feel like he's being prioritized in the long-term future, I just feel like those are ways that locker rooms start to get destroyed. And I don't necessarily think that that's the coach's job to make players think that they're a part of a long-term answer.
Now, Will, let me say before, I think I know where Chris is going. When they signed Logan Ryan, of course, McKinney was injured. Are you saying they signing Logan Ryan last year? I guess
that was
made
great.
sense.
No. I think Chris and I are saying the same thing.
I'm talking
Logan
about
Ryan as a Logan Ryan as exactly, as a fill-in with Nate Solder out and that money left over and McKinney out.
Listen,
So so he has the roster spot.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. But then
look at Logan Ryan's contract. Look at
Exactly.
Logan Ryan's contract. And I love Logan Ryan, okay? I don't want anybody to think I don't love Logan Ryan. I know he's one of the most popular players on the team. 3 years, $30 million. That's less than what Dalvin Tomlinson got. Now everybody's complaining that Dalvin Tomlinson isn't on the team. They're saying that he's impacting the performance of Leonard Williams, which I do think there's at least some validity to that. Well, who would you have rather had at this point in time? Logan Ryan or Dalvin Tomlinson? You pick. Who would you rather have had? Kevin Zeitler or Logan Ryan? Because they made about the same amount of money. Matter of fact, Zeitler made less. So I think there's a strong argument to be made that was not the best usage of the salary cap for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, I love Logan Ryan as well, but it's also fair to acknowledge that he has not lived up to anywhere near the contract so far between the dropped interceptions and the Giants allowing so many big plays. He has not been the impact player that we've wanted since week one. He had like an incredible fumble recovery in week one, but since then we haven't really seen Logan Ryan pop up in like a positive way. And to give someone who I think was 30 years old at the time, somewhere around there, a 3 or $30 million contract, it kind of goes back to the whole Gettleman. I'm not going to include Judge in that exactly because it's mostly been Gettleman with the veteran guys, like just giving like this artifact type guy who did play pretty well last year, but giving him 3 years, like even when they signed him for 3 years, I said to myself, like that feels like a lot. It could be a 2-year contract technically, but to kind of just get yourself into that contract in the first place, a 3-year, $30 million deal it's quite the commitment. It's not Nate Solder level of contract, but it's like, you're still committing a lot, and you just drafted McKinney in the second round the year prior. You still had Jabril Peppers for at least one more year. Of course, we'll see what happens.
Right, and just exercise the option on Peppers. So
that's what I want to happen. Like franchise him if you need to. Like I don't think they're gonna be able to. Probably won't. But the safety franchise tag is such a luxury right now. I know Jamal Adams and what's his name, Simmons in Denver kind of effed that up. But like the safety franchise tag is like it's a pretty much a bargain right now. So if the Giants are unclear. It's probably 12, 13 around there. So if they're unclear still, like I would be fine bringing Jabril. Like I don't think Jabril Peppers is the type of guy I want to give a long-term extension to, nor do we probably have the funds to do that right now because there's other priorities on this team. Of course, the Giants push a lot of money back into the future. I mean, Galladay's going to make more next year. Leonard Williams, of course, is going to jump up a lot next year with his cap.
And the restructures on Bradbury and
exactly.
Next year, Bradbury.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this right now. I'm curious to get your guys' take on this because I do think this is something that at least will be contemplated, especially if we move on from Dave Gettleman at the end of the year. Do you think Bradbury and Blake Martinez are back next year?
So
because you look at Bradbury's cut, you save $13 million if you cut him. You look at Martinez's cut, you save $10 million if you cut him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to get there. I haven't, even before the injury, I didn't think Blake was going to be back next year. I thought that was that was structured as a 2-year deal, kind of as a fill-in. And I kind of expected that the Giants would have drafted somebody to try to ultimately take his place. After the injury in particular, I have a really hard time seeing Martinez back. And I don't necessarily think this is about Martinez himself, but like we were saying, a lot of the contracts on the roster now are backloaded. And even these, Martinez and Bradbury very specifically were initially front loaded, and they've been restructured to fit in some of the guys that we've talked about over the last few minutes. But I don't think Martinez is back, and I think if the team loses a couple more games, then Bradbury's going to be gone too. And that's part of why I didn't think the Jackson signing made sense, because I felt like Bradbury's money fit, and the team didn't necessarily have the long-term answer, down. So a lot of guys were looking at wide receivers. My kind of pipe dream, and I've very much been on the hill that I'm not a scout and I don't really know how players are going to translate. But given how highly both J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain were grading out, I was hoping that the Giants were going to go cornerback in the draft, and I'd love to see a guy like a new Corey Webster who can be a 6-year lockdown CB1, because cornerback is really a position where a guy goes from at the top of the league to really becoming burnt toast, but faster than almost anyone.
It's almost like running back in a way, right? I mean, to a lesser degree maybe, but yeah, I mean, when cornerbacks hit a certain age, you see like drastic drop-offs, unfortunately. I do agree with that point, though. I mean, when you go back to the draft, could the Giants have went different ways? Of course they could have. Talk about not taking offensive linemen is a big issue, of course. We talked about that many times in the past. Not taking Slater, doing the trade back. Was it the right idea? We'll find out in the future.
I gotta be fair. I was pissed off. When I've seen the way that Rashawn Slater's played, I was a huge Slater guy in this year's draft. I gotta be fair. Based off the way Tony's played and the draft pick we're gonna get from the Bears, how could you really argue with
it? I could live with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could live with it.
So to be fair, I was talking about these cornerbacks that I like going into the draft, but neither of them were available by the time the Giants were picking. So there's nothing that the Giants could have or should have done differently. And I've been begging for trade backs really almost since Justin Pugh was drafted. So like year after year, if you've known me, that's very much the case. So I thought that this offseason in general was almost criminally short-sighted, and the fact that we traded back, and the other piece of the trade back, we picked up a first, which is fantastic, but the other piece of that you got to remember is when you draft a guy at 20 overall, you pay him less than when you draft a guy at 12 overall. And with
in fairness, it kind of offsets the next year because you have an extra first-round pick. But
yeah, no, that's absolutely true, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up trading down and or trading even forward and getting a pick in a year in a 2023 pick out of that, especially if it's a new GM who has a long-term mandate. But I've been begging for a trade back for a long time, and I thought the Nate Solder restructure of his contract so that basically the dead money we're spending is for him on the roster instead of for him not on the roster was the biggest win of the offseason until we traded down, which I just think is so long overdue and so indicative of a foundational shift that is, certainly a few years too late, but, we could argue a lot more than that too.
I think, Chris, you asked me, I think 2 weeks ago when the last time we talked about, like, knowing what we know today, would you still have done the trade or have taken Rashawn Slater? And I said, I think I would stick with the trade. Like, I am that. It sucks the Bears are 3-2. It sucks that the Bears are 3-2 right now, of course, but, like, at the same time, I can't pass that up. As great as Rashawn Slater would be, you're saying he would have to move to right tackle now, and then, maybe that messes up something mentally with Andrew Thomas. I have no idea. Matt Parrott's an afterthought after that. If it happens, like there's ripple effects if you have taken Rashawn Slater. Yes, he's a fantastic player for the Chargers right now, but it's not always the same fit with a different team. People make that argument all the time. If Josh Allen went to the Giants, he wouldn't be the same quarterback. We hear it all the time.
The only thing that was a real head scratcher for me, I don't like when a team tries to do two things at once. And
win and rebuild,
much like 2018, right? When they tried to win and rebuild at the same time. This year, free agency, it clearly, nobody spent more than we did outside of probably New England. They were like, we're all in, we're winning. And then in the draft, when you have an opportunity to take a guy that I thought was a top 5 or 6 player in the draft, you elect to trade down and help the future, which obviously based off the value, I can't argue it. And based off the way Tony's playing, it looks great. I don't like trying to do two things at once. If you're going to try to be ultra aggressive in free agency, stick to the plan and continue to try to improve this year's roster as much as possible. That was my one issue with the trade down.
I will say the Giants' inability to stick with a plan has been such an issue the past half decade. I think, like, That's why fans like me and Will get pissed off. Like if the Giants just like had an actual plan with foresight and plan this out better instead of going all in 2018. And even we might look back on this season. Yes, it was year 3 of Daniel Jones and you kind of had to. They had their backs against the wall. But even this year, if they go all in with the contracts of Galladay and Adoree and Rudolph and whoever else we sign, and that doesn't work out and the Giants are like a 5 or 6 win team this year, we're going to look back and say, damn, they should have just rebuilt back then. Like I understand it's a hindsight thing, but there are fans that just want a sound process. And as you mentioned, Chris, they're out there spending a ton of money in free agency, and they had a chance to take a Slater or even a Parsons, who many people, myself included, thought was a top 5-6 player in this draft, and they trade back for the future. So it's kind of like double standard, right? I mean, it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
So, I understand what you're saying, and winning. But it is a balancing act. There aren't really teams that are just saying, all right, everything right now is only about right now.
No, you're right.
Unless it's extreme circumstances.
Yeah, there are examples.
The other thing that I think we got to keep in mind is I understand that Slater has shorter arms than a lot of the guys that Gettleman's drafted. And there could have just been a red flag that they didn't like there, and I understand. But the Giants had a lot of holes to fill, and by not kind of rebuilding a few years ago, it's and there's still a lot of holes that haven't been addressed. I mean, edge we can talk about until our cheeks go blue, but I think that they really committed to upgrading the weapons on the outside, and I think that they were really caught off guard by Waddle and Smith both being off the board, and they decided, all right, like it's crazy to get a wide receiver now, so we've got to trade down, and we'll still be able to get the wide receiver and fit the plan of how the offense is supposed to look. Yeah. What scares me is if Philly doesn't trade up and doesn't take Devontae Smith, do we still trade down?
No.
Or do we? And that's a part that really scares me. Like I made I'll retweet it in a moment, but I made a meme right after the draft of Ed Truck from The Office with Michael Scott. It's him, and I've got Ed Truck being like Dave Gettleman, finally getting. I got it to send it to everyone, but it's like Giants fans finally being happy that we traded down, and then Michael Scott, is Dave Gettleman being like, wow, it's a good thing that Philly ended up trading up and stealing Devontae Smith for us, but I still think that's a real process question, because it's really hard to say that given where this team is right now, that Devontae Smith this year is worth more than a potential first-round pick that can really have a 5 to 8 year impact for this team.
Plus Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, I thought all along, going back to like December, that we were going to take Devontae Smith. I thought he'd fall to us at 11 because I thought Waddle was a much better prospect. And I was thrilled when the Philadelphia Eagles traded up to get him because I didn't want him. I wanted Slater, and that's when I sat back, relaxed. I'm like, okay, we're either trading down and taking Slater. But I was relieved when we didn't end up with Devontae Smith because I didn't want him at 11.
It's understandable.
I was exactly the same way, and I think that Smith is clearly electrifying, but Smith is much more a guy who helps you with making highlights and getting on SportsCenter than getting into getting through the playoffs. I'm a really small guy, so I want to see small guys do well, but you got to be worried with the guy with his frame taking the beating that he is week in and week out in the NFL.
Yeah,
I still have that. It's like engraved in my head now. The Dave Gettleman first press conference. You gotta run the ball, stop the run, and pressure the passer. And I just replays in my head over and over again because A, that saying is outdated, and B, we are here 4 years later and we don't do any of those things. That's why, it just makes me cringe in a way. Like, I think Dave Gettleman came in here with a philosophy of he can still win in today's NFL if he uses the approach of like the early 2000s type football, ground and pound and stop the run. Then he realized 2 years in, maybe Joe Judge influenced this as well. I do believe that personally. Then he kind of realized this is a passing league. Analytics kind of matter. And then they kind of changed their entire philosophy. And I always get concerned that what the Giants did in Gettleman's first 2 years, 2018, 2019, is still messing up what we have now in a way. I know we had a big offseason of signing some guys and improve the team on paper, but I still get concerned that the problem was we hired a GM back in 2017 in December, whenever the hell he was hired, that was stuck in a different time period, if that made sense. Like I just don't think like he couldn't even stick to the plan of run the ball, stop the run, pressure the passer. And we may have the worst pass rush in football right now. It's bad.
Here's what I'm gonna say. I think you could definitely make it. I guess that saying may be outdated, but I do think had he done it properly and built an offensive line, I still think that's a way to win football games, because if you could run the ball, it makes it much easier to pass. If you could stop the run, it makes it much harder for the opposition to throw. And in fairness to Gettleman and the Giants in general, they did draft a lot of DBs, which is kind of new school thinking when trying to build a defense. It just hasn't worked out. The offensive line has not worked out. They signed Nate Solder, didn't work out. They traded for Zeitler. Had he fixed the offensive line like he said he was going to, I do think that you could have a great offense with that. You look at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys are run for 800 yards over the last 4 weeks. That makes it much more efficient passing opportunities for Dak Prescott. So I'm not going to say I'm going to kill him for his philosophy. I just don't think he carried it out well.
I think offensive line, of course, I'm never going to just kind of I'm not going to like not realize how important offensive lines are to being a good NFL team. We've seen it time and time again. Go back to the Super Bowl last year, even though you have the best quarterback on the planet, not having the offensive line was the big reason the Chiefs lost that game. But I also want to go more in depth. Like people kind of talk about offensive line in general. I also want somebody who is making the decisions, the GM, of course, to realize like, left tackles are the highest paid guys, the guys you should be taking earlier in the draft, guys you should be paying the most. We tried it with Nate Solder, and I did not kill Goodham at the time. Obviously, it didn't work. And I also want a GM to realize guards and centers are not paid as highly. They're not taken usually as higher in the draft. Like I want that type of philosophy, understanding that having a good offensive line is very important, but you also don't have to throw a ton of resources for a guard and throw a ton of resources for a center, because you want to – your tackle spots are the most important. I think we've seen it now already with Daniel Jones progressing in year 3. I'm sure part of that is Daniel Jones progressing himself, but how much of that has been because Andrew Thomas is playing lights out? I choose to believe that's a big part of it, honestly.
Well, Andrew Thomas has a ton to do with it. Left tackles, but what I will say, the guy that you hear all the time that people complain about is Quentin Nelson. He's a guard. That's what everybody says we should have drafted or traded down and drafted. But I do think there's rare exceptions where an interior, like the guy in Iowa this year, looks phenomenal, the center. I think there's rare exceptions where interior offensive linemen are worth an early pick. But overall, I agree with you. The tackles are obviously much more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the point that I love to make is that I think a lot of people look at building the offensive line, and not to steal a line that I think is misused a lot on Twitter, but like it's Madden. And the line very specifically is not necessarily about how talented each player is, but what they can do next to each other. And, I keep pointing back to the line that really the nucleus of the line for 2 Super Bowls. You had David Beal, who was an interior line drafted in the 5th round, who was playing out of position at left tackle. You had, your left guard was Rich Soibert, who was undrafted. Your center was Sean O'Hara, who was undrafted. Your right guard, who was Chris Nee, who was a 2nd-round pick, and McKenzie was a free agent, who was a 3rd-round pick. But this is not like necessarily like a guy, like a line of supreme athletes and prospects. These were hungry, mean guys who knew how to play next to each other and knew how to battle the hell out of their opponents. And if you look, obviously the Giants have had a pretty bad line for a while now. But if you look since 2013, what I read recently the other day, the Giants have spent more round 1 and round 2 picks on the offensive line than any other team since 2013. That's 5 picks. It's Pugh, Richburg, Flowers, Hernandez, and then Thomas. And obviously
more than the Saints,
more
than the Cowboys.
That's a stat I read. That's 5 guys since 2013. We'll have to check that out, and I'll.
You might be right.
I'll dig up the receipt of whoever I'm stealing this from. No, I haven't queried it and looked at it myself. But the Giants have continued to invest real premium capital here, and there's a little bit of you got to let these guys learn how to play versus you got to find somebody who's playing over. So I think a lot of the idea of draft Rashawn Slater, draft Penny Sewell, and the line's obviously a lot better. It's not quite that simple, and I just want to reiterate that. But that being said, I've never seen a left tackle or a tackle in general that's given me as short and long term excitement like Andrew Thomas. And I think you don't necessarily need a superstar, but having a superstar makes everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a guy that I think is Like if Andrew Thomas plays at this level for the next 2 years or so, and of course stays healthy, which it could be an issue. We'll find out down the road. But if he plays at this level, I think he's important enough to give him exactly that, just massive extension. Because whoever our quarterback is, hopefully it's Daniel Jones 5 years from now. But like we'll just have that left tackle spot just down pat. And like so many teams around the league, of course, are looking for their next left tackle. That's why they get paid so much money. That's why Nate Solder, an average left tackle, gets paid as the highest tackle in football, because once those guys hit the market, teams are so hungry for one of those guys. And if the Giants found one, it's going to be
those guys never hit the market. When they do, it's Nate Solder. They're too valuable. But
Andrew Whitworth the year before.
What is that?
Yeah.
No, Andrew Whitworth the year before, but I think, we were talking kind of like we were talking about Josh Allen. I think that Whitworth really went to the right place. And I think if he went to the Giants, he would have had a very different, that signing would be looked very differently in hindsight than it looks when he went to the Rams.
And he was probably 35 when he was a free agent, so the age was a concern. But here he is playing at near 40. Someone talked about Nate Solder here. Joey G Sports, maybe it's Joey Gallo. I'm so sick of Nate Solder. Cut him now. So sickening. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't like the biggest fan of bringing Nate Solder back personally. I mean, of course, for the pay cut, you're like, okay, fine, come back and be a depth piece. But based on how he's played so far, A, there's no reason he should be playing over Matt Parrott, and B, I just would rather not watch him every Sunday if I had the option. So I don't know what we can do with him now. I don't see the Giants randomly cutting him at this moment in time, especially with the offensive line injuries they've sustained so far. But I guess looking back on it, they probably I liked Cam Fleming. I wish we brought Cam Fleming back as a swing tackle, cheaper option, and just was outside of that Rams game last year. Cam Fleming was fine. He wasn't really killing us, but I prefer someone like that, because Nate Solder, honestly, when you watch him, he just looks finished. That's the way I look at it.
I didn't have a problem bringing him back, especially because he took the pay cut. They were going to have to pay him, I think, the same amount of money that they cut him anyway.
Exactly, and that's the point to emphasize.
Yeah, and my issue was when he got the starting job. But to me, when he got that, it was more so, and obviously that's Judge's decision. They must have felt like that Solder looked better than Matt Parrott. But to me, that was a bigger concern about Matt Parrott. And that's when I started to get, I guess, nervous about this year's offensive line even more so, because you heard Gettleman, in like July say, oh, we're going to give the young guys a chance. And he kind of hinted at Matt Parrott. And when Solder won that job, you started to say to yourself, what the hell is going on? Is Matt Parrott not good enough to beat out Nate Solder coming off a year up and not playing? Because you had to figure if they were even close, Parrott was going to get that job. But based off of, the performance last week, I see no reason, as long as Andrew Thomas is good to go, which it looks like he will be, I see no reason not to get Matt Parrott out there this week and try to develop him. I mean, at the end of the day, we're 1-4 right now. Parrott was our second highest graded offensive player last week, looked a lot better than Nate Solder. Granted, Solder was on the left side, which is more challenging, but still, even if they're equal at this point, you have to get some experience for the young tackle.
I'm all for that. I've seen people with the same take, and I don't see a reason why you would not play Matt Parrott. Like, what does playing Nate Solder as a 1-4 football team who's 10-point underdog, what does that do for you? If Nate Solder even has a fantastic game, great. Okay, the Giants still probably don't win this game.
He did that, one preseason game in 2018.
I just don't know what putting Nate Solder out there does for you at this point. Of course, coming into the year, I kind of understood it more. We even talked about it, Chris, how they were playing two very tough pass rushes with Denver and Washington. And I asked you at that point, do you think they're going to start Nate Solder the first 2 weeks and then transition to Matt Parrott? But I guess in the Giants' minds, Nate Solder has just outplayed Matt Parrott to such a point where Matt Parrott had to find the bench for the first 3 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks. So it's frustrating, and I liked Matt Parrott as a pick and as a prospect. I was hoping that in year 2 here he would play a lot more. I figured for sure Nate Solder was going to be a backup, so I'm sure all of us did. I think most of us were shocked when that tweet came out that Nate Solder was going to be the starting right tackle or was listed as the starting right tackle on the depth chart. We're like, what the hell happened to Matt Parrott? But now after seeing the way he played on Sunday, it's like, why wouldn't you put him out there? Like, if he gets embarrassed, it's like, fine, I get it. But like, at least show us, like, give us Matt Parrott, because we don't care what Nate Solder's doing. Once again, the Giants are probably not going to win this game. I hope they find a way. Probably not. But, even if Nate Solder has the best game ever, like, are we really going to care? Because we know who Nate Solder is. He's like 32 and doesn't have a future here. Matt Parrott's 10 years younger and has a future here. Like, we want to see Parrott play, and it makes the most sense in the world right now.
This is just me speculating, but part of me thinks Judge is just one of these guys that wants his younger players or rookies to earn their starting spot in the rotation. And you saw it with Kadarius Toney.
Tom Coughlin.
And yeah. So part of me is like, maybe that's the reasoning is, he felt like because maybe they were even, he was going to give the spot to start the year to Solder and make Parrott earn it in practice and eventually take over the spot. But hopefully that starts this week.
Yeah, I think your point is huge. That Solder starting is not about Solder; it's about Perk. And I think I don't want to see the Giants just get rid of Solder. I thought there was a chance that was going to happen at the end of camp. I'm glad it didn't, because I don't necessarily see how we can find a better tackle. Maybe Isaiah Wilson, can develop into that. But I think that there's a lot of excitement about Isaiah Wilson purely because he was a first round pick. And I think, if 32 teams decide we don't need this guy right now, they're deciding that for a reason. I don't think we can really count on anything from Wilson, anything at all, until the coaches decide that, he's showing them enough there that, there's something going on. But we had 6 linemen, Pert, and then the 5 guys who started who made it through camp, and 2 of them are out for the year. So, we're going through guys who can't make any roster. So I don't think it makes sense to even, get rid of a guy who, if nothing else, at least knows, the guys next to him and knows a little bit of the playbook. So I don't think anybody was more anti the signing than I was, from March of 2018. But I don't think that you want to just get rid of him to have a scapegoat for the offensive line, because I don't think that makes the team better.
Yeah, exactly. Once again, Pip named Slickback talked about what you guys were talking about before. Yeah, he's right. The Giants have taken the most. Saints have taken 3. I guess this is offensive linemen. Cowboys have taken 3, but the Cowboys and Saints have taken a lot in the 2nd and 3rd round more than us. Like, you could find great talent in the 2nd or 3rd round. That's kind of been the downfall of Gettleman so far in his drafts. And if you want to include Joe Judge the past 2 years, go ahead. But
and Reese before that.
And Reese, exactly. I mean, we all know Reese sucks. I hate harping on that. But it's just if he hit on more middle round picks, yes, he found Darius Slayton. I mean, we thought he found a gem in Ryan Conley. Maybe he found something in Tate Crowder, who I don't think Tate Crowder is ever going to be like a linebacker number 1, but could be a very solid number 2. Yeah. We may have, he's found guys at times, but for the most part, you look at Dave Gettleman's mid round picks and you look at the Kyle Laletta type of guys, and the BJ Hill gets traded for a center that was basically
BJ Hill was a good pick.
He was a good pick, and it's a shame that we kind of well, this goes back to Leonard Williams now, but it's a shame
that's it though. That's it. And we're talking about how he makes it up as he goes along. BJ Hill was one of the 30 best players on the Giants roster going into training camp, but they didn't have room for him to make enough of an impact so that the $3 million they'd saved from moving on from him was worth it based on who else they had at the position. The problem wasn't they traded BJ Hill to find somebody who was on the line who probably wasn't necessarily as good of a football player as BJ Hill was. The problem was that they didn't have patience with BJ Hill to develop, and they had to put cosmetic upgrades on a potentially 2-14 team and trade for Leonard Williams and back ourselves into this corner where now he's got another 3 years for $63 million.
Right. Yeah, it sucks, the entire situation. I mean, I wish, I wasn't completely against the Leonard Williams trade at first. When they didn't extend him the first offseason, that was really where it pissed me off. But I kind of understood it. I'm like, look, Leonard Williams is 25, and he's a very solid football player. I figured an extension at that time for Leonard Williams would be like a $12 to $13 million per year type thing. Then, of course, the Giants delay it. They franchise him. He has a great year, and now we're paying him $21 million per year because Leonard Williams had all the leverage in the world and kind of, I guess, held Dave Gettleman hostage in a way because, I think Gettleman even admitted at one point that, Leonard had all the leverage, and Dave basically said, oh, I'll be stupid, or you guys will laugh at me if Leonard Williams walks or something.
Yeah, it was
along those lines.
The end of the 2019 season in his press conference, he said, I admit I'll get killed if we don't bring him back, but I have thick rhino hide, is what he said. And the other piece of that I thought was really offensive was when he rationalized the trade, and he talked about how, it was good to see how Williams fit in the Giants defensive system, obviously when the defensive coordinator was a lame duck. But he also said that, if we decide not to keep Leonard Williams, we'll get a comp pick. Well, no, you won't, man, because you're about to, spend a lot more in free agency than, other teams are going to spend on ex-Giants. So it doesn't work that way. There's an off. So it's like.
Wait. Let me make sure I'm understanding this properly. You're saying they wouldn't have gotten a comp pick had they the previous year or this offseason?
I think actually
the previous year they would have. They had no cap money. The previous year.
2020's offseason.
Yeah, I mean, Antoine Bethea was like their biggest signing, outside of the franchise.
Right. No, but that's about the 2019. Yeah, but that.
Oh, I didn't know what year you were talking
Right.
about.
So they traded for Williams in the middle of the 2019 season, and the end of 2019. It's about the 2019 offseason for about the 2021 comp picks. But that's the year that they're bringing in guys like Bradbury. They're bringing in Martinez. They're bringing in
okay.
and they're not really. I don't think there's anybody really of consequence on the Giants roster who signed a deal elsewhere. So he was factually wrong when he said the Giants were going to get a comp pick. And I remember I spoke to a guy who's an expert on this stuff. It's just not true. And there are things that he says that are not true. And I just find listening to this guy and having him in a position of authority is essentially pissing on fans' heads and telling us it's raining. And I'm beyond fed up with it. And I feel like at this point we know that every plan and every promise this guy has made has not come true. And at this point, it's hoping that there's going to be a better optics on the exit, not figuring out what the best thing is for the long term. And it just got to happen immediately.
That's what frustrates me a lot with Gettleman is just how condescending he'll come off and not even live up to the promises. I talked about this on Twitter the other day. I can handle a GM that's condescending if you're good. But when you're a GM like Gettleman, who has the record he has and has, I think, been at least a bottom 10 GM in football since he's been here, to be very nice about it.
In football history, or
well, yeah, we'll talk about it when he's done. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can speak that way and just have the record he does. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think that's just the way he is. And there was that question that I think Tim Jones had about the pass rush, and then Dave Gettleman said, it takes time, darling. And here we are,
he said the year before too. Actually, he said the
20...
same thing. The year before, also. And to your point exactly. In 2018, going into 2018, there's some free agency signings that make no sense. 2018 proves that the fans who have no resume actually understood these signings better than Dave Gettleman did. What he says in the offseason, well, you got to trust us. You got to look at our resumes and trust us. Well, guess what? What does he do at the end of the 2019 season? He looks at Pat Shurmur's resume. He looks at his track record. He says, you know what? To hell with you. You didn't get it done. Doesn't say anything about himself.
Gettleman didn't want to fire Pat. That was ownership. I remember Gettleman coming out and saying that he was upset that Pat was fired. That was ownership that fired Pat. Which I think was a mistake, by the way. I think they should have kept both for one more season or fired both.
Oh, I can certainly agree on that part, but I've heard both. And, I think it was the first place I heard it was from incarcerated Bob, who I don't think is, completely useless, but I don't think anything he says is necessarily true. But he tweeted several weeks before it happened, which kind of fit right in when the tea leaves that I was reading starting to tell we're telling the same story, that Gettleman himself recommended that they moved on from Shurmur.
Maybe I'm wrong. I thought I remember.
And to be very clear, Bob could have said this, and Bob could have been wrong. So I'm not saying that just because somebody tweeted it that you're wrong. But
I never understood. This was my issue with the Shurmur thing. I this whole podcast just been talking about the past, but that my issue with the people. My issue with the Shurmur thing was this. I obviously knew that Pat Shurmur was not a great head coach. I understood that why they moved on from Shurmur, but why in the world, if you knew? Because you had to know going into that season, if Daniel Jones was going to start from day one, which essentially he did, Eli started the first 2 games, that your record wasn't going to be very good. You were going to win 5 or 6 games, and that's what they did. I think they won 4 games, 5 games, whatever it was.
4
if
12,
you knew that you were going to fire him if they won 4 or 5 games with a rookie quarterback, why did you allow Pat Shurmur to select the quarterback? Because Shurmur, they brought Daniel Jones in specifically for Pat Shurmur's scheme. So that's what I didn't understand. If you knew when you drafted a rookie quarterback, you were going to fire Shurmur if you won 4 or 5 games.
They did.
Then you selected the quarterback.
They very much didn't know that. You can point to the town hall at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, well, then they shouldn't have fired Shurmur, in my opinion. They should have kept Gettleman in for one more year, and if it didn't work out, you blow it up.
I completely agreed, and I actually thought, I'm very much on the record of this, but I thought Shurmur was a lame duck as soon as the draft pick was in 2018, and I thought firing Shurmur would be a mistake. Because, if you looked at my profile right now, it's my pinned tweet. I say, okay, what happens? You fire Shurmur, you put in a replacement. By the time you start doing the hard things to actually rebuild this team, there's going to be a question about the new coach's job security. And one thing that I feel very strongly, I think there are improvements that Joe Judge has to make, but you cannot fire the head coach who's finally fixed our foundational flaws the year that he finally trades for a first-round pick next year. You just,
But then the issue with that, and I agree with you, I don't want to fire.
Right. No, you can't stick.
If you want to bring in an outside GM,
right,
which everybody does, you're going to now force a head coach on him, which is why, to me, you should have kept Shermer and Gettleman on the same timeline. When you decided,
I think you're right, and I think you can't fire Judge unless the replacement has a damn good reason and replacement in mind, and I think that's really tough right now, especially with the Rooney Rule. Like, I don't even know if it's legal, but you can't fire Judge unless you have a better prospect, because people want to say, okay, Gettleman built a good team, but we got to blame Judge. Well, Gettleman already scapegoated his last coach, and some of the guys that he wanted to replace that last coach with didn't want to take this job. So if you're going to, if you want to scapegoat the head coach, you got to understand the head coach is only the head coach because of some other problems that are going on.
That's why the Giants have annoyed me so much recently. There's no foresight with this team. I think because that's the part that annoys me, is that fans like us, who I think we are pretty educated fans for the most part. Yes, we get things wrong. So does everybody. But if we can sit here and say, like, getting rid of Shermer and not getting rid of Gettleman is a bad idea, why doesn't John Mara comprehend these things? Because it's so easy to see.
I'm going to tell you why.
What's going to happen.
I'm going to tell you why, in my opinion, at least, and I could be wrong. I think John Mara caved to the fan base.
I'm sure.
Multiple times.
I think John Mara saw
and Mike Francesa.
Everybody hated Pat Shermer, and even though, and I said it, and people killed me for it on my YouTube channel, it didn't make sense for me to fire him unless you were going to completely move on. And I wanted them to stick together for one more year, and then we could have started the rebuild after that year had it not worked out. But I didn't want to screw up Daniel Jones in year 2. But I think he saw that the fan base was like, Shermer sucks, get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him. Rightfully so. The team won 4 games. You heard about the DeAndre Baker not knowing the playbook, but it just put your quarterback in a really, really, really bad situation. So to me, it was ass backwards. It didn't make a lot of sense. And I like Joe Judge, but now you're going to find yourself in another really tough spot where you're forcing said GM. You're forcing a head coach if you want to stick with Joe Judge, which is why, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. If I had to guess right now, year's end, I don't think there's any changes. I think they fire Gettleman and just promote a guy from within the organization. I think that guy steps up, and it's basically status quo for another year. I think they're going to give Judge another year. I think they're going to give Jones another year, and I don't know if it'll be Kevin Abrams. I don't know if it'll be the guy that they brought over from the Lions. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Kyle O'Brien.
Yeah, O'Brien. I think they're going to promote somebody from within the organization to basically just continue to build off of what Gettleman and Judge have built the last 2 years. And I think they're going to get one more year with this team together. That's my guess, especially based off all the large contracts that they have on the books next year.
I can see that because I'm sure John Mara and his sick,
which is really no changes. It's just giving the fan base.
Yeah, exactly. He probably thinks in his sick, twisted mind that, oh, well, the fans want Gettleman fired. All right, let's get Gettleman out, and everyone's going to be happy. And it's like not the way it really works. I mean, yeah, some people are going to be happy because people think I just have this personal vendetta with Gettleman. I don't. I've wanted him to work out, but at this point, like, how can I sit here and say he's done a good job? And like, because if he has done a good job, I would admit it. I've given him really good grades. I guess, we do grading videos as content creators. I've given him good grades the past 2 off seasons of what he's done. And it's not like it's a narrative thing. It's just, I don't think he's done a good job overall, and things are not working out. So I don't think John Mara can sell a lot of us just by firing
Gettleman. That goes without saying.
But it's not going to win me over. Like, I want to give Daniel Jones another chance if we don't like any of these quarterbacks in the draft. I completely get that part of it. Bringing Jones back for year 4 if he still looks good. But in terms of just like promoting Abrams or promoting the like Chris Pettit or the O'Brien dude, what does that really do? We're still going to have the same like organizational philosophies for the most part. It's not enough of a change for me. And the Giants have been the worst team of football since 2017. I need change.
I don't think he's saying this is what they should do. I think he's saying it's
that's what I think they're gonna do.
Right.
No, I agree. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
So I will say that there are a lot of points that I want to throw out there, and I'm kind of losing track of them because there was a lot that you guys just hit on. But I disagree. I think Gettleman is a matter of weeks.
Okay, I'm saying they're going to promote from within the organization.
No, right, but I think that we actually will get some wholesale changes. What those wholesale changes are, we'll see. But I do think that we're going to get some actual real structural shift, and I actually think there's a possibility that Chris Mara gets resigned. So, we'll see. But I think that we're really seeing that this hasn't worked, and at long last, we're finally going to get some accountability.
I hope you're right.
And if you're right, I think Judge is fired too.
Well,
that's my honest opinion.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have they're gonna have to make a decision. I think they're gonna go into it with an open mind. I hope that they don't know what they're gonna do with Judge when they start making these decisions with the GM, and that they actually listen to an outside voice, because if there's nobody in the front office right now who's earned any credibility to have an opinion on moving on to Judge.
I think Mara is the main problem. I'll always think that. I think that's why Gettleman got the job to begin with, because of John Mara. Because either A, the only way any GM was getting that job is if either A, they wanted to stick with Eli Manning, or B, they were willing to accept it. And I think John Mara was the main reason why Gettleman was hired. And maybe Gettleman didn't even want to keep Eli Manning, but he knew he wasn't going to get the job unless he accepted it and tried to rebuild and win at the same time. But maybe he did. But he was not going to hire a guy that wanted to start a rebuild in 2018. That's my honest opinion. So I think Mara is the biggest culprit. And what I'll say is this, man, if you're going to go that route, which I'm not against, I do think that it's going to be a tough sell, though, because of like some of the things I've said for trying to bring in a really accomplished GM candidate, because of the bad contracts that we now have, and all, and basically you have all these guys that you brought in to fit the schemes that now you're going to rip up all over again that may not fit the new schemes that, with the new head coaches and everything else. It's going to, if you go that route, it'll be a complete overhaul. But I'm with you, man. If you're going to bring in a new GM, you have to give him full say. You cannot say to that GM, like I think he did with Gettleman, or at least only hired him because he was willing to stick with Eli Manning. You cannot hire a GM and be like, well, we really like this young head coach with Joe Judge, who's won 10 or 11 games in his first 2 years, but he's got a lot of promise. You cannot do that. If you want to get the best general manager candidate, you have to say, I'm hands off. You do what you want to do. If you don't want Judge, completely understandable. The guy's 39 years old, special teams coordinator, hasn't accomplished much in the NFL. And if they're going to go that route, I think that's what they have to do. And maybe he'll elect to stick with Judge, or maybe he won't. But that's the best way to go about doing things. Do I have full faith that they're going to do that? I have my doubts.
That's what scares the hell out of me, is that the best GM candidate is somewhere out there. There are a bunch of young, bright, great minds in the NFL right now. But what John Mara is going to do is limit those options. It's kind of like putting a filter on something. Like if you're shopping for a pair of shoes or something and you want to save some money, you go for the $50 and under section instead of going for like the 200 and max.
That's what happened with Shermer. That's what happened with Gettleman. That's the only reason those guys got the job, is because they were willing to stick with Eli.
Yeah, unless the Giants run into dumb luck, it's not going to work.
So the piece about Shermer that I do want to talk about, and as I think we both said, and I don't know if Mike's been quite on the record about if he wanted Shermer to stay or go, but I
was fine keeping him if Gettleman stayed. By the way,
but I do think that Shermer coached an aura of complacency, of like hey, but well, I wouldn't necessarily. I think there were some good things he did. I think the offense looked a lot more better developed with Shermer. But I would say that the players, from what I understand, didn't take him seriously as somebody to fear, and they thought of him as somebody who was like a friend. And and I think what we've talked about is the Giants have basically been like a sixth grader dreaming to get to the NFL. And Gettleman keeps saying, all right, well, maybe next year you'll make it. Maybe next year you'll get drafted. Maybe next year you'll get drafted. But we need somebody to say, all right, first we got to pass the 8th grade. And I don't know who that person's going to be, but we need to get those little checkpoints. We're not going to get to the Super Bowl next year with a new GM. I think that's something that we're willing to understand. But there are little things that we can look at that show we're on the right track. And really, in 4 years of Gettleman, those have been very few and far between.
I hate that. Oh, so go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, Mike, but I'm just thinking I like to get my thoughts out.
We all do that, I think.
So I understand that a lot of the fan base, probably yourself included, and I understand it. I'd be for it if they elect to go this route. Wants a complete rebuild. They want to completely blow it up. But at the end of the day, can you see John Mara doing that? This is a guy that has come out and said, I expect us to be competitive the last 2 years. I expect us to compete for Super Bowls. If he says we're ripping this all up again and doing a rebuild much like he did in 2019, he's saying to the fan base, listen, guys, you got to sit back. You got to relax. He's not going to say it. I'll say it for him. You got to sit back. You got to relax. This team will not be competitive until 2024 if things go as planned, if they completely blow this thing up. Can you see John Mara doing that? Because quite frankly, I cannot.
I pray for this type of thing every night. Like, I literally have a letter written out to John Mara, by the way. I've never sent one to him before, but after that week 3 loss to Atlanta is when I was so disgusted. I stayed up to like 4 a.m. typing a letter to John Mara, and I included that specific thing. I said, we as a fan base, maybe not all of us, but majority of the fan base will understand if you rebuild the correct way.
They say they will now.
They will. Like, even people label me as like I'm impatient. Like, no, I'm not impatient. I want this to be a smart process. We don't have a smart process. That was the problem. If the Giants rebuilt the right way, I could have lived with it for 2 years and have been a non-playoff team. Fine. We could have been what Buffalo ended up being or what Cleveland ended up being. We built like morons. I guess I will leave there for a second, but we built like morons, and that's kind of why
we tried to win in
this situation.
2018 screwed everything up. We tried to win and rebuild it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I was off the Gettleman train right after that offseason. But if they rebuilt the right way, I think I would have been able to withstand it for sure, because 2018 was 4 off seasons ago. By now, the Giants would have been a Super Bowl contender if they had done things right. I understand you miss on picks. Not every GM bats 1,000. The best ones bat 30, 40%, like whatever. If they just had the right process back then, I think most fans, the logical ones at least, would have been able to get behind it and say, hey, look, we may have 1 or 2 pretty rough seasons, but eventually this has a very good chance of working out, rather than Dave Gettleman, after 2 years of being the Giants GM, going on Michael K's show and go, well, we were trying to win and rebuild at the same time. And it's like, no, that's not how you were supposed to build a team. Like, it just pisses me off, honestly. I pray to God that they finally do the rebuild right. But going back to your question, Chris, I don't see John Mara doing it because John Mara wants to win. He just doesn't know how to win. You can lead a horse to water, can't make him drink it. So
I only have a few minutes, and then I'm going to have to hop. But I do want to answer this question because I think it's very important, and I think, frankly, nothing gives me more hope for Mara coming around and doing the right thing than how I've been perceived on Twitter. And a lot of people have looked at me as like a villain for the last years because I've been crying for exactly what you're talking about. After the Atlanta game, I listened to a post-game recap, and Bruce Beck from NBC said, well, geez, if I don't know if fans are going to be patient if we keep losing or whatever. And I find that so offensive because it characterizes fans as basically just these sheep who go in and expecting Nate Solder and a running back to turn a 3-13 team into being an NFC Championship contender. But we're not impatient. We are desperate for a vision that has patience. And there's a huge difference in there. And I think nothing gives me more hope than that, from seeing how universally a lot of these sentiments have been received on some of the Twitter spaces that I've had, up to which have had up to thousands of Giants fans.
By the way, I'm not saying you as an individual or Mike as an individual, but I do think that it's just New York in general. It's not just the Giants specifically. Yeah. It's widely known that people say it's almost impossible to rebuild in New York because people demand results.
But we can't.
Right, and I understand that, but but I think Mara is finally waking up to the fact that in 2018 he defined the success for that season as making the playoffs. In 2019, he defined the success for that season as making the playoffs. In 2020, they finally took a little bit more of a long-term approach. And then they saw a little bit of progress, so they said, okay, 2021, guess what would be nice? Playoffs, guys, huh?
Playoffs, yeah.
And I think I genuinely think that at this point, especially after this offseason where he spent so aggressively, and he's like, all right, I can't put my foot any harder on the gas, that he will be willing to at least interview somebody who will say, like, okay, I might not remember what Ernie said, in that 2004 draft meeting, but at the same time, I might be able to tell you some stuff that can actually make this football team better. And guys, I only have a few more minutes, so if there's anything else you guys want to get out before I bounce and leave it to the two of you, would love to do that. But this has been a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Yeah, of course. We want to get to some of the questions here, of course. We'll do that after you leave. But of course, every time we talk to you, it's like a lot of revisionist stuff. And we'll go back to the whole why the Giants are the way they are right now. And I think it all comes down to John Mara, unfortunately. There can't be some person that walks into that building and changes everything. It comes down to a mindset of John Mara. And as you said, Chris, and I agree with this, unfortunately, it's great to root for New York teams. They have some of the best fans in the world. We're all very passionate, and, you know, we love our teams more than just about anything. But the problem is in New York sometimes you have people that are so impatient. This is like such a big media. You have people calling into WFAN and whatnot and talking about, I'm tired of losing and blah, blah, blah. But if you have a team like I always go back to Cleveland. I love the way Andrew Berry runs that team over there. That's a team where it's not as vocal. They're not as outspoken. Yes, the Browns went like 1-33 in a combined 2 seasons. It doesn't get talked about as much as if a team like the Giants or Jets are completely terrible. So the Giants are kind of their own worst enemy sometimes based on where they play. But John Mara is also his worst own enemy because of the way he runs his football team. I think if John Mara really had a long-term thinking approach and had the foresight and said, once again, let's just actually hit the reset and rebuild for 2 years. And at this point, I'm not saying I want to completely reset. I don't know what I want. We have another, 13 games left this year, whatever, 12 games. Let's see how they play out first. There's a lot of time to decide. But it's also not the worst idea in the world to go for a rebuild and get yourself to a Super Bowl contender, because Will talked about it. They always say playoffs, let's make the playoffs. But the Giants, even last year, we all were pissed off when the Eagles threw that game in week 17. If the Giants made the playoffs and played the Buccaneers in round 1, were we really going to win that game? Like, I know we were close with Tampa in the first, but they really hit their stride in the second half of the year. So, like, I get making the playoffs is fun and all, but like if there were going to be a first round exit, it's like, what's the point? You know what I mean? So like, I want to build to be a Super Bowl contender, long lasting success type of team. It's hard to find that. You have to find yourself a great quarterback. Of course, we'll see if Daniel Jones can be that guy.
You also need to build the trenches. You need
I just sustained success. That's what Gettleman promised in 2018.
Right. It's Gettleman speaks very, he speaks very well sometimes and sometimes not, but like sometimes he'll say the right thing. He'll say the right thing, but doesn't deliver, of course. And that's what I want as a fan, is sustained success and having a team that can make a decade-long run of being Super Bowl contenders, kind of like, how Pittsburgh has been, and Green Bay and Seattle and all these other. The Chiefs are going to come up here. Even the Chargers are now building a great team. Like I want something like that. Cleveland, and I don't know who Baker Mayfield is yet. We'll find out. But like still, it just teams like that are building for long-term success and don't go all in for just like one or two, one off season where the Giants throw a bunch of money at free agents and said, all right, well, maybe we'll make the playoffs if we get lucky. I don't want that. It's great to make the playoffs once again, but that's not how you get to a Super Bowl, which should be all of our ultimate goals as fans. That's what we all want.
Yeah, I want to jump in and then I'm going to have to log off. But one of my favorite books, and one of the books that influenced me the most, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, includes a line that I think really, really resonates with me, which is from Albus Dumbledore. It's humans have a knack, or as much wealth and happiness as one could have. It's funny, Harry. Humans have a knack of choosing precisely what is worse for them. And it's a line that really speaks to me, and I've tweeted it several times, and sometimes I've tweeted it with certain presidential candidates from 2016. Sometimes I've tweeted it with certain draft picks from 2018. But I think that's really true. I don't think that fans necessarily know what they want. And I think fans actually I think the Giants fans are more self-aware today than they've ever been in the past. And I just, in my bones, I do have optimism that Mayor is hearing some of it. And so I want to say that I do think that we're going to get, and we traded down this year. I mean, there are some, clues that there is progress that's being made. So I'll sign off with that. I think, leave it to, can't wait to hear what the rest of the conversation looks like, but hope to see you guys, if not this week, at a game sometime in the future.
For sure. Thank you for joining us, Will. I mean, it's kind of like a late minute addition here, kind of the opposite of like a last minute scratch. But it was fun to have you on. I figured you and Chris would be a really good combination, of course. And you guys are some of the, I'm not going to say like someone's the best fan, but like, some of the most, famous fans, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube, whatever. I think having you guys talk together was a good idea, and it worked out very well. I know a lot of it was talking about the past, but it's hard to talk optimistically.
It's our first conversation together.
It's hard to talk about a 1-4 football team in a very positive.
It's hard
way.
to talk about the present without recapping the past.
Exactly.
With this team and the way it was built. And listen, man, what I will say is, I'm equally as big of a Knicks fan as I am a Giants fan. And as a Knicks fan, we've been I think the fan base, and I don't know if the Giants fan base is there yet, because the Giants fan base is much more accustomed to winning. As bad as it's been the last couple of years, Knicks fan base they got to a point where they were just like, screw it, do it right. We will sit through 3-4 years of crappy basketball to build this team right.
The Tim Hardaway signing when they finally had created some space. That's exactly what that's exactly what we're talking about. And it's nice to see a Knicks fan here. Mike, you're still a Knicks fan, or is there a new team that you like now?
No, Nets till I die. It's gonna be that way. Kyrie Irving's playing this year, by the way, just so everyone knows he's coming back.
I had to throw that in there for our boy Nicky Snacks. But guys, I'll talk to you later. Thanks to everyone for listening. A lot of fun conversation. Let's go Giants.
Yeah,
pleasure getting to talk to you, Will.
All right,
take care, guys.
See you. All right, I thought I had to remove him, but okay, so he did it himself. Anyway, sorry. Do you want to continue our conversation or get to some of the questions here? Because
let's get to some of the questions. We'll feed off that.
For sure. This one's more a Washington football team, but Mr. Ahmed here says, "What up, y'all? I find it disrespectful that the Washington football team, now retiring number 21, of course, Sean Taylor, is to sway us from the email narrative." So yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. It was a very weird situation. So of course, we all know about John Gruden and what happened with the emails and how it was tied back to Washington's organization and how they randomly, basically today, I think it was announced, say that Sean Taylor's going to have his number retired 3 days before the game. Is anything fishy there? Or is it just me? There has to be something.
Oh, for sure. You look at the Giants. I mean, they announced. Yeah. Eli and Strahan were going to be retired before the year started. Mm-hmm. They're definitely trying to get some of the negative attention away from the organization. Listen, man, that to me is so ironic that basically the reason John Gruden got fired was because of his brother, what he did in Washington. But yeah, I mean, listen, man, everybody's saying, well, not everybody. There's definitely some people that are coming down hard on Gruden, which I think is deservedly so. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing to me that nobody is mentioning, some people are saying people have always done dumb things in their lives, right? You got to get over it.
That's more than dumb.
How stupid. First off, you're a professional. Okay, and not to say that I agree with anything what he said. It was horrible, right? Completely uncalled for. How dumb can you be?
Thank you.
To post that stuff in a professional email. People used to come down, not that I want to get political at all, but people used to come down on Hillary Clinton for what she posted in her emails. John Gruden in a professional NFL email was posting racist comments and things like that. How stupid can you be in today's day and age? So Gruden got what he deserved as far as I'm concerned.
I was asked at work multiple times because people know I'm a big sports fan, and some people know about my YouTube at work, and they asked me hey, what do you think about John Gruden? My first thought was how stupid can that guy be? Obviously, what he said was terrible, but how stupid can you be? To say these things, you're John freaking Gruden, my guy. You're making tens of millions of dollars, now making over $100 million, as we know. And I can only imagine what, ESPN paid him for Monday Night Football. You are a somebody. If you're a nobody and you get canceled, okay, whatever, it happens. But when you're John Gruden and you're out there sending these emails and you know that they could resurface one day, how dumb. This is why I have no sympathy for him. I really don't. So I think he got what he deserved. And it's kind of shitty, honestly, that they're using Sean Taylor's number to kind of gloss over this in a way. I think it's not the proper way to pay respect to him in any matter. So it's just, I don't know. It's Washington being Washington, Chris. I mean, they kind of make us look like a good organization a lot of times. So I do thank them for that.
As of late.
Once again from Slickback, thank you again. I don't root for my team to lose, but I think national embarrassment is the only way to change Mayor's mind. I think we finished 5-12. It's Abrams 2022. Do you think that way, Chris? If they finish around, let's say 4 to 6 wins, do you think that's enough to completely embarrass Mayor and change everything, or do you think that's more of we'll just promote Abrams?
I think here's what I'm going to say. If Judge is going to be back next year, I'm 95% sure they're going to hire a GM from within the organization, unless they're stupid. Because if they're going to force Judge on another GM, that's the stupidest thing you could do. It's going to limit your potential hiring candidates. And let's be real. If Joe, Mike, let's be fair here. We're Giants fans, so if you have your Giants cap on, I want to give Joe Judge another year. I don't want to move on from another head coach after 2 years. But if the Giants say win 5 games, like he said, if you're I don't know, name a guy that you want to hire as the GM, whatever it may be. Are you going to want to be told that a guy that's won 11 games in his first 2 years, that's 38, 39 years old, that's his biggest credentials were a special teams coordinator before he took the job, are you going to want to sign up for that job and be told you have to have this guy as your head coach? So my line of thinking, Mike, is if they want Judge back, which I think ultimately they're going to want, I think they're going to hire a general manager from within inside the organization.
Yeah, and if you tell your GM candidates you have to keep Judge, it's once again limiting your GM candidates because like there's going to be GMs that come in here and realize how important a head coach is for a team. And if you say to that GM that is one of the higher ranked GMs out there and said, oh, you have to keep Joe Judge as your head coach, like he's probably not going to sign off on it because, as you said, Joe Judge would be an 11-win coach in 2 years in this scenario. And former special teams guy.
He'll get somebody.
They'll get somebody to be the GM.
Just not going to get the bell of the ball.
I just want someone to be I want the best. That's why I want the best GM candidate. Yep. And I think going about it that way is not going to give you that result. And like, I think having a GM with a vision and a good vision and actually understands what it's like to have a good process, I think that is very important. I know having a good coach is very important as well. But if you told me, Chris, I could sign up for having a great GM with a vision and changing coaches or promoting Abrams and keeping Judge, as much as I want Judge to work out and I do like him, I'm going with the first part. I want the GM with a vision because I know how much that will help the future success of the Giants. Once again, they may hit the reset button and suck in 2022 and 2023 even, but by 2024, when we're thinking way ahead in the future, but they could be like an actual Super Bowl contender by then if they do it right. So that's why I would rather, I'm not saying I want to move on from Judge right now, but if you're offering me option A, option B, I'm taking option A in that scenario. And I want the guy who is a great GM. And if we have to get a new head coach because of that, then I think so be it. I just don't know where this team improves per se, just by promoting Kevin Abrams. I don't see it personally.
Yeah, it's fair.
So, yeah, that would annoy me kind of. Thank you, Zeke Anderson. DG has ruined this team. His roster construction and team building is nothing short of franchise malpractice, something I can agree with. As I've said before, I think it has gotten better in 2020 and 2021. The trade back this year in the first round showed a lot of growth from Dave Gettleman. I think 2020's offseason of really going after guys in the secondary showed that Dave Gettleman understands this is now a passing league. I think the Giants going after Kadarius Toney and going after Kenny Galladay also proves that they know this is a passing league. So Dave Gettleman has made strides to adapt to the modern NFL, and that saying adapt or die. Well, Dave Gettleman finally adapted, but it may have been too late because of the consequences he made in 2018, 2019, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Gettleman's going to be fired no matter what. And 2018 was obviously a disaster. Who you want to put more of the blame on? Whatever. It doesn't matter at this point. Gettleman's going to get the blame. He's the general manager. Whether you want to blame Maramore or Gettleman, it really doesn't matter. It's hearsay at this point. What I'll say about Gettleman, obviously his tenure with the New York Giants, unless this team has a miraculous turnaround, is going to be looked at as a failure. His legacy, yet to be determined, in my opinion, because Andrew Thomas could turn out to be a phenomenal left tackle. Mm-hmm. Kadarius Toney could turn out to be a great wide receiver. Daniel Jones could turn out to be a great quarterback. So there are still some pieces that he has brought in that maybe could be huge building blocks for the future of this football team. But overall, I mean, I don't know how anybody could say that Dave Gettleman's done a good job. The team's won what now? 16 games since he's been here. So I mean, So I mean, 37. Yeah, he's been a disaster. Ultimately, he will be judged long-term based off of Daniel Jones. If in 5 years, if Daniel Jones ends up being a Super Bowl winning quarterback, people will look back and say Gettleman didn't do that bad of a job.
Yeah, that Gettleman guy wasn't that bad, right?
He wasn't that bad. That's like Ernie Accorsi, right? Even though, of course, he did a much better job before he retired. But overall, his tenure here with the Giants is obviously going to be looked at, as a failure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it has time to change, of course. I don't know if he can recover from some of the mistakes. And I think when they took Barkley at 2, we all agreed that he had to be a Hall of Fame level player for that pick to make sense. And so far, it's not even close. So, Saquon, of course, has a long career ahead of him, hopefully, and we'll find out as the Buccaneers take a 14-7 lead. That's good. But we'll find out what Barkley does here the next couple of years and how his career turns out. But right now, it just hasn't been worth it so far. But as you said, if Kadarius Toney ends up being like a Percy Harvin that stays healthy, and Daniel Jones ends up being like a Ryan Tannehill that wins a Super Bowl and things of that nature. And Andrew Thomas ends up being like, Jonathan Ogden or something they can really be like Dave Gettleman's tenure will be looked at in a fond way rather than what it is right now, which is crazy to think about, but things can change very fast.
If it works out, which we don't know, you could say he drafted a franchise quarterback, a franchise left tackle, the two most important positions on a football team. So that's why I say in terms of his overall legacy, I think it's yet to be determined. But in terms of the job that he's done, it's kind of like a president. A lot of times, people say you can't really judge what a president did while he's in office it's kind of, you got to wait 6, 7, 8 years to see the long-term effects. I think it's the same thing with Gettleman. If these guys work out, people say, all right, well, he did have a lot to do with this team's success. It just didn't work out while he was there.
Yeah, I just think it's, as you said, it's like there are people that still defend Gettleman, which I think is
No,
crazy
you can't.
and narrative driven at this point. But I can't sit here as a sane person that I like to consider myself and say that Dave Gettleman's done a good job. I just can't do it. So I don't think anyone should argue that. From Zeke, once again, thank you. Mara should relieve himself of all duties, hire someone from the outside who's over the GM to make football decisions where we're a poorly ran organization. I get it. We are a very poorly run organization. I wouldn't mind hiring.
I mean, even the year we won the Super Bowl, we got lucky. The second time. The 2011 team it's the worst team ever to win a Super Bowl. I don't even think that's
like, of all time, or like Giants.
Yeah,
really?
I think so. I mean, Mike, that year we had the 32nd ranked rushing attack, 27th ranked defense. I mean, we went 9-7 and we won a Super Bowl. We were 7-7. We won our last 2 games, one of which included a 99-yard touchdown against the Jets. So, yeah, I mean, we got hot at the right time, and Eli was incredible that year. But overall, yeah, I think it's the worst team to ever win a Super Bowl.
There felt like some magic that year. I will say, I felt it.
It was Eli. It was Eli Cruz. Like they just created. They kind of. I guess like hid the holes with, by making big plays that year and all the fourth quarter comebacks. But this team has not been built properly really since like, I don't know, maybe 2009.
Yeah, I don't even know.
So, I agree. I mean, at this point, this franchise is ass backwards.
And that's all I want. It's the sad part. I know that just because you hit the reset on a team does not mean you're going to get it right, but I at least want to see it happen and give us a chance. You know what I mean? Like the way we're doing things now is like, let's rebuild one year. Let's go for the playoffs the next year and kind of just do that over and over again, which is the definition of insanity. If we just find a way to actually have Mara commit to an actual rebuild, like I'm fine seeing how it goes. Like I know some fans are probably going to be impatient about it, but like at the same time, I can't remember the last time the Giants completely hit the reset button and did things the right way. And I just want to see how it goes, at least before I die. I want to see how it looks and see if the Giants can.
Well, they did. In 2019, they did hit the reset button. It came a year too late, right? They traded away Beckham. They traded away all the high contracts.
Right.
And
they still signed Golden Tate. They still had Nate Solder on that ridiculous contract. Like it wasn't a complete, but you couldn't trade Solder either. So I get that.
It's going to be next year. You're not going to be able to do a complete rebuild because of all the contracts you have on the roster.
That's the sad part.
And that's why I don't think it's why I think we're going to push forward. I think Jones is going to get another year. I think Judge will get it. It's just me guessing. My opinion may change over the course of the year, but I think Judge and Jones will get one more year, and they'll see if they can push forward with this team before they decide whether or not, a blow up is the best course of action.
From Dave here, thank you. Hi, gents. Here's a question for you. What constitutes a team's purpose, direction, and winning culture to you? This is one I got to think about. So, Chris, you can go ahead if you
I got to think too. What constitutes? Wow. Well, I think the most important thing in terms of a team having sustained success is having a clear vision and sticking with it. Not, like I said earlier during the stream, not trying to do 2 things at the same time. Trying to build a team a certain way, and I think there's several ways to build a team and have it be an effective football team. The Ravens, the way they build their team is completely different than the way the Titans build their team.
The Titans, yeah. Right.
The way the Chiefs build their team is completely different than the way the Cowboys build their team. But there's different ways to build a team and be successful. But I think you need a general manager and a head coach on the same page that are in agreement. And I do actually think that Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman think alike in terms of the way that they want to build a football team. It just may not work, but I do think that that's important, and you need to stick to a plan. And as fans, you need to give them that opportunity. It's why I gave Gettleman probably longer of a leash than I should have, but I wanted him to have a fair opportunity to carry out this rebuild, which did start a year late. I say that all the time, but to me, this was the year that I needed to see some results, and some progress. And so far, we haven't seen it. But I tried to be as patient as I could as a fan, and tried to give him a real fair opportunity to build this team properly. But, as of now, it doesn't work. But, yeah, I mean, to me, you got to have a plan. You got to stick to it. And the most important thing is you can't try to do 2 things at once.
Yeah, of course. I'll try to answer these. So purpose to me, the purpose should be to win a Super Bowl. Once
Of
again,
course. Yeah.
don't settle to make the playoffs. Don't settle to be a playoff team. Of course, you got to get in the playoffs to reach the Super Bowl, but don't make the ceiling of your team the best possible outcome be like a first or second round exit in the playoffs. I get anything can happen. The 2011 Giants, of course, anything can happen, but you don't want
2007 Giants.
that's true as well. Like you don't want to build your team to be that way, but like I also want sustained success, and that's kind of what the winning culture part of this question comes into it. Like having sustained success, and once again trying to be the Packers and the Seahawks and the Ravens, even like teams like that have found a way to just be winning teams. Like, yeah, I know that sometimes teams have down years. The year that Rodgers hurt his collarbone, they went 6-10. The Ravens, I think, had a bad season at one point in there 5-6 years ago, whenever it was. But like for the most part, if you look at their record over the past decade, they're very good. They're some of the best teams in football. So you're going to have 1 or 2 seasons where injuries hit you and you get a few bad breaks. We know how it's a game of inches. We saw Adoree Jackson drop a ball where we should have won the game, and Darius Slayton. We know it's a game of inches as Giants fans. We totally get that. And Dexter Lawrence jumping off sides. There are so many things that can go wrong in a season where, although you have a team that should have been a 10-11 win team, it could be a 6 or 7 win team because these little things go wrong with injuries and what happens in the game. But ultimately, if you find like good teams are going to find a way to have good seasons 7 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times. And I just want a team that can get to that level. Now, of course, it all depends if Daniel Jones can be a franchise quarterback, because if you don't have a franchise quarterback, it's hard to be the Ravens and the Steelers and the Seahawks and all those great teams. You have to find a way to find your franchise quarterback. And I still have my questions about Jones, but I want to see how it plays out the final 12 games of the year. So I hope that kind of answered the question. It was a tough one, I will say. So, I mean, that definitely got us to think here.
And I was just thinking about one more thing as you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
I think and obviously a franchise quarterback goes without saying, but I think, I go back to the last time the Giants had sustained success. And the last time the Giants had sustained success was from 2005 till about 2009. That was the last time in 2000. Well, the 2 Super Bowls. Well, 2005 to 2011.
I'll say 12 because then they go 9-7.
Yeah, 12, they went 9-7.
We'll go with that.
And the most important thing on that team, and people forget, Eli Manning was not good his second year, but they went 11-5.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they went 11-5, a large reason, was because of the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line. They led the league in rushing. They had the number 3 ranked offense in Eli Manning's second year when he was a mediocre quarterback at best. You look at all those teams you mentioned. The Packers have one of the best lines in the sport. The Ravens have one of the best lines in the sport. The Cowboys have one of the best lines in the sport. The Patriots always had one of the best lines in the sport. Some of that definitely goes to the coaching. They had one of the best offensive line coaches. But to me, to have sustained success in the NFL, you need to be able to protect your quarterback and get after the opposition on a consistent basis. And until the New York Giants get that, they're not going to have sustained success. Are you going to have a year here where like they won 11-5 and they made the playoffs? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Where the defense kind of carried him and Odell Beckham had a lot of big plays and they found ways to win games. But in terms of being a consistent franchise year in and year out, you need to be able to establish up at the point of attack. It makes the quarterback look better. It makes the running back look better. It makes the wide receivers look better, and it makes your defense look better because it keeps them rested on the opposite side of the field. So that to me, in terms of sustained success, it starts there. It starts up at the point of attack.
Yeah. Now you talk about that, of course, with the offensive line. And I thought about this. I have random thoughts when I'm driving a lot, and I had this thought of I was thinking about teams that have had 2 really good tackles and how good they were. I went back and thought about the Packers. I went back and thought about the Packers with Bakhtiari and Bulaga. I went back and thought about the Ravens with Staley and Brown. I went back and thought about Cleveland with Conklin and Wills. I went back and thought about even the Eagles with Lane Johnson and Jason Peters for a 5-6 year stretch. If you have a good left tackle and right tackle, it's really hard to have a bad offensive line. You can put some average dudes in the interior, and you're going to look really great offensively. Of course, having like Jason Kelsey for the Eagles instance makes it a lot better. And you'll find yourself, if you have really good tackles, you're going to like kind of rub off on the guards and even the center. Like you're going to make it work somehow. So I think it's important, of course, to like the Giants may have their franchise left tackle, and we may need that one more piece that could be right tackle, whether that's Matt Parrott, whether Isaiah Wilson makes this insane jump and gets his head on straight. I don't know, but they could be like a right tackle away as long as Andrew Thomas plays well for hopefully a decade stretch here. From building an offensive line that can sustain success, and that's what we want. And the Giants may have that one really important building block, which could be Andrew Thomas. So that gets me excited, but of course, finding that right tackle is going to be
I think difficult. I think they could do it in this year's
And you
draft.
could sign one too. Like we just talked about Jack Conklin with the Browns. He was a free agent from Tennessee, and I think the Titans had to choose between him or Derrick Henry. They went with Henry. Conklin had to walk at the age of like 25. He was young and has played phenomenal for the Browns in his first year and a half. So like there's sometimes an instance where a right tackle will just leave a team, and even Brian Bulaga went to the Chargers, hasn't been that good. But there are times where a good right tackle will leave a team. So I guess it's possible. Left tackles though, hard to find good ones that leave teams. We've said that before. From Zeke, once again, thank you. It's a passing league, and nothing is more important than the pass rush, not the defensive backs. The pass rush is deodorant for everything that stinks. Building the defense with the secondary as a strength is a mistake. I may go against this, honestly, Chris. I think that because it's hard to say as Giants fans because we do have a good secondary. We're supposed to have a good secondary on paper.
Yeah.
Supposed to. That's the key word. But I think if you build your defense through the secondary, I think a lot of time you're going to get coverage sacks. And I think Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants says this a lot. I trust that man very much. He knows his crap. He says just about every sack is a coverage sack. And it makes a lot of sense. It's very rare to see a quarterback taken down in the first 2 seconds of a play. Like a lot of times it's going to be a quarterback who has to hold on to the ball because he can't find an open guy. I think, and I used to think the same way as Zeke. I'll be honest. It's the more of kind of like that's what I love about sports. I learn new stuff every day, honestly, and you get smarter. I like to think at least you get smarter when you watch more sports and read things and see different trends and analytics, and just see like that secondaries nowadays are more important than pass rushes. There's a way to mitigate a good pass rush. You get the ball out quickly, like Phillip Rivers used to do, like Tom Brady does, like name a quarterback who gets the ball, Ben Roethlisberger now even. There is not really a way to mitigate a good secondary unless you could run the ball down their throat. Of course, that can change it. There's not really a good way to mitigate an awesome secondary. The Giants have had a lot of flaws this year, allowing the big plays, and they can't stop the run either. But if James Bradbury played at last year's level, let's say Adoree Jackson played in his rookie year level, and everyone in the secondary was clicking, and Jabril Peppers was covering tight ends the right way, and Xavier McKinney was making more plays, and Logan Ryan came up with the interceptions, this Giants defense would be awesome. I know that not having a pass rusher hurts. Like, I'd rather have a good pass rusher than not have one, believe me, but sometimes it's hard to fit all that in your salary cap. Yeah. But I think in today's day of age, having a good secondary, to me at least, is the most important part. And I feel like I've seen enough like numbers and statistics and whatnot to kind of back that up. So,
yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say to that. I mean, I guess there's an argument for both sides, right? You look at like the 49ers, they've built a lot around having really good pass rushers. That certainly helps. But at the same time, I could point to several teams that have had sustained success defensively that have built through the secondary. The Buffalo Bills, the New England Patriots,
the Ravens.
The Baltimore, I was about to say the Ravens.
Tampa Bay has a good one.
Look at the Ravens let go. They let go of Zadarius Smith. They've let go of Matt Judon because they feel like it's more important to build through the secondary. So
Ngakoue too.
And Ngakoue as well. Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously in a perfect world, you want both.
Yeah.
And you definitely need to be able to get after the quarterback. But I'm kind of in agreement with you. I actually slightly favor a strong secondary to a strong pass rush in today's NFL because I think offenses have adapted and they get the ball out super quick. And obviously, if you have great coverage, it's going to give those edge rushers an extra second or two to get after the quarterback. So I think you need both to have a great defense. You definitely need both. And a great edge rusher certainly helps. But if I could pick one or the other, I would pick a lockdown secondary as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I mean, yeah, there are teams that we've seen built through pass rush. We've seen, like, as you said, with building a team in general, there are different ways to do it. You can build a team like the Chiefs. You can build a team like the Ravens, like Titans. There's not one single recipe for building a team. There are plenty of different ways to do it. There's smart ways to do it and not smart ways to do it. The Giants have kind of been in that not smart category, unfortunately. But there are ways to build a team. Now, I think in I guess trying to defend Dave Gettleman, I guess in his defense, he was trying to build this team by improving the offensive line, by signing Solder, signing Omame, drafting Will Hernandez and things like that. And who else I'm forgetting in 2018, I guess moving Flowers, the right tackle, they were hoping would do something, but drafting Barkley and trying to establish that ground game and give Eli Manning more time off the play action and keeping defenses more honest, because the Giants would have been a two-dimensional offense that could run the ball with Barkley at a high rate and also pass the ball with Eli off play action. I think that's the vision that Dave Gettleman had. I think we all know that. It just didn't come to fruition because we didn't have the right offensive linemen and the right personnel. I can't really say it's all Pat Shurmur's fault. I thought he was a fine offensive play caller. He's just not really a head coach. So I will defend Dave Gettleman in that he had somewhat of a plan and vision. It's just that plan and vision was flawed. And I think a lot of fans called it out. And unfortunately, for some of us, that came to fruition. And here we are years later. And it hasn't worked out, obviously. So, but as you said, there's plenty of ways to build a team. It's just you got to do it a smart way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And everybody has their own way that they would build a team. A lot of people might take the route of, I want to get the weapons, and that'll help the line. I'm the opposite. I want to get the line. I think it'll help the weapons. But
it's like the Bengals with Jamar Chase for Sewell. We saw so many debates in April about it. It's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody's got their own idea of how they would build a team. And I think both ways could be successful. It's just a matter of getting the right players in place and the right coaches to get the most out of the players.
Yep. I think the way I just want good football players at important positions. That's the way it goes for me. I mean, I know people may disagree on what's an important position and what's not. I kind of just go by like which positions are paid the highest. If you look at like the franchise tag numbers, the highest paid positions are quarterback, left tackle, cornerback, pass rusher. Like those are like the main four. I would, if I was ever a GM, not going to happen. I'll say Madden GM because I do play some Madden here and there. If I'm ever going to build a team, it's going to be like, let's address the offensive tackle position early in the draft. Let's address quarterback, obviously, early in the draft. Let's address cornerback and secondary and pass rush. Like, I'm not going to, like, this is where I disagree with Gettleman with spending such a high asset on, we know Saquon and all the arguments, but even Dexter Lawrence, who now is not really performing here in year number 3. When they picked Dexter Lawrence, I said, Chris, that night when he was drafted, Dexter Lawrence is a good player, and he's probably going to be here for a decade, hopefully. I do think he was a good player when they took him. But to me, that's not the type of guy you take at 17th overall in the middle of the first round, because what is the upside of Dexter Lawrence? It's a 2-down player. People may argue, oh, well, he sometimes pushes the pocket and whatnot, but the guy had under 10 sacks in like 3 years at Clemson. So I know it's not all about sacks, but like Dexter Lawrence never had a path to being an elite pass rusher in this league because the guy is like 330 pounds, whatever the hell he is. So he never had that path of being a great pass rusher in this league. I guess sometimes guys make it work, like Vita Vea for Tampa Bay. But when they took Dexter Lawrence, I was sitting there and saying to myself, like, how does this make sense? Like, I would have rather have taken a shot on, like an offensive tackle or Montez Sweat. Even like, I know he's been a bust, but like taking Andre Dillard, who the Eagles took, has been very injured. Like, even if we took him as like a developmental left tackle project, it would have been better than taking the guy who's a run stopper, because I just feel like you can find those guys in the middle rounds of the draft. It's the same argument for running backs, you know what I mean? But me and Dave Gettleman, of course, when it comes to how you would build a team, definitely differentiate a lot, which is kind of why I don't agree with him, unfortunately. But in Gettleman's defense, once again, he has gotten better the past couple of years, so I'll give him that.
I think there's exceptions to the rule. I generally agree with you in terms of positional value. If I was a GM, left tackle, quarterback, edge rusher.
Now, let me say, can I cut you off real quick? Sorry. There are outliers. There are outliers to that positional value, because there are people that, of course, reply on Twitter and say, "Oh, what? So Luke Kuechly wasn't worth it," or "Oh, what? Chris Jones, Aaron." Yes, there are outliers.
Saquon Barkley, if he stayed healthy, is definitely
Kyle Pitts. I was all over for the Giants if he lasted.
So there's outliers. There's outliers. I agree with you. The most important positions are quarterback, left tackle, cornerback, and edge rusher. Those would be my top 4.
Right. And then you find the outlier guys that, are just some of the best at their positions. So that it happens for everything. Do you want to talk about, just real quickly, because we're 2 hours in, I don't want to waste any more of your time, just kind of a little like a mini preview of the Rams game and kind of what we expect. It probably won't be any positives, but like, just talk about what we expect.
It's kind of hard, man, for me to like preview the game until I get like the injury report. It's why I haven't really made any videos this week, because I don't know who's going to play. Like if Daniel Jones is not going to play, we have no chance. Like, well, maybe we do. People point to the Seattle game last year. Yeah. Maybe we do, and I'll look like a complete fool. But it's kind of hard for me to preview the game until I know that Jones is playing and knowing which players are going to be out there. But obviously, this Rams team is no joke. I mean, we had firsthand experience last year. We actually played them good. Yeah. We almost had a chance to win that football game, and maybe we come out with a good game plan and we find a way to compete in this one. I wouldn't be shocked. They're traveling across the country. Crazy things happen in the NFL every week, but if Jones is not playing, we don't have a chance. Right. But yeah, I mean, there's no way, if you're being completely unbiased, especially with Golladay likely out and Barkley likely out, definitely out, that you could expect the New York Giants to win this game. But that's why they play the games, and that's why the NFL is what it is. It's unpredictable. So there's always There's always a chance, but this Rams team is awesome. I mean, they have arguably the best defense one of the best defenses in the league. I think Sean McVay is one of the best offensive play callers in the league, and obviously Stafford is a major step up from Jared Goff. So, this team's gonna be tough, man, and they could beat you a variety of ways on both sides of the ball, and it's gonna be a good test. I mean, if it's gonna be the same thing I said about the Cowboys. The best chance for the Giants to win this game is the offense is going to have to be able to sustain drives and keep the defense off the field. And if they could do, and I know they're not going to be able to do that every drive, but obviously they need to have some more success this week. And if Daniel Jones does play and he's completely healthy, maybe they'll be able to do that. But they got to have sustained drives to try to chew up clock and keep their defense relatively fresh if they're going to have a chance to beat the Rams. And obviously they can't make turnovers. They turned it over twice last week, albeit both came from Mike Glennon and kind of in desperation time when the Cowboys knew they had to throw the ball. So I actually don't, one thing I will say about the defense is horrible. It's been horrible all year. They did create 2 turnovers against the Cowboys, and that was the only reason why the New York Giants even had a chance in that game. One was self-inflicted by Dak Prescott, but with the fumble. But yeah, if we're going to win this game, you can't turn it over. You got to create a turnover or 2, and the offense has got to win the time of possession.
Yeah, I just don't know how the offense wins time of possession, especially with Saquon out. Like, you have an offensive line that really can't run block. I don't know where the Giants rank in run blocking, like win rate and all that crap. I don't know where PFF ranks them off the top of my head. But just watching them, it's like they have no push on run blocking on the offensive line. From what we've seen, there's been a few plays where the Giants break off a nice run, but just for the most part, 90% of the time, there's guys in the backfield when the running back gets the ball. So it's been unsustainable really to keep up a good run game for the Giants. And when you're facing Aaron Donald alone, it's like, how are you supposed to do that? So that concerns me right there. Is like, I don't know how we're going to be able to keep the ball offensively for a long time. I almost think that the way to beat this Rams team is just by going for explosive plays downfield, which kind of goes against your logic. I understand wanting to keep the ball out of their hands, but I feel like in order to beat this team, you avoid Jalen Ramsey, who will be on their best receiver. And Jalen Ramsey has traveled to the slot this year. He may be on Kadarius Toney if he plays. Maybe he's on Sterling Shepard. We'll see. But of course, try to avoid him and just attack the other guys in that secondary. This has to be like one of those games where John Ross has not 1, but 2 big touchdowns. I feel like for us to have like a legitimate chance of winning this game. And you already know, Chris, Deshaun Jackson's going to have a 60-yard touchdown against us. I'm waiting for that one to happen, of that jackass trotting backwards into the end zone and, doing some stupid dance. I could already see it happening, but there were a few other points I wanted to get to. They have a running back at the Rams, Darrell Henderson. I'm sure anyone that plays fantasy football, I'm sure knows about Darrell Henderson. He's having a nice year. The Giants don't stop the run. I mean, we saw it against Dallas last week. I put out a tweet that the Giants have to start stacking the box because Dallas is
will say this, though, Mike.
Uh-huh.
I do think we have if we're healthy. I'm not. Well, I know we're not healthy, but if Jones plays, I do think we match up better with the Rams because the Rams
Cowboys.
Than the Cowboys. The Rams run game is not near what the Cowboys is. The Rams are averaging only 3.8 yards per carry. The Cowboys are averaging over 200 yards on the ground in the last 4 contests. So I do think we match up better with them. I don't view the Rams offense quite as explosive as the Dallas Cowboys, plus we're at home. It's why before all these injuries, I thought we had a much better chance to beat the Rams. I do think we match up better with them. But I do see our offense struggling against their defense.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. And it's hard to win when you don't put up points, obviously. Like, the Giants have had point totals this year of like 3 games of under 20 points, and it's hard to win when you're relying on your defense to hold other offenses under 20. But yeah, I touched on Darrell Henderson. I think, the Giants will probably have a tough time stopping him because our run defense has not been great this year. Of course, as you said, Dallas has a better running offense, as we know. But even Cooper Kupp in the slot. Cooper Kupp has been off to such a tremendous start for the Rams. They even got Robert Woods involved last week. But our slot cornerback situation is not good. We don't have, of course, Aaron Robinson, the 3rd-round rookie this year. Darnay Holmes has been out of the rotation, basically.
Can't even see the field.
Can't see the field. Julian Love, I've never thought for, ever since I watched Julian Love's first preseason, I could tell that guy was not going to be a slot corner because, Julian Edelman in that Patriots game back in 2019 was just making him look foolish. And I like Julian Love, but to me, he's an outside corner. I don't think he's has the quickness to be more of a slot guy, which you need a lot of quickness and great instincts to be a slot guy. And I just don't know if Julian Love has it to that level. He's a good outside guy, just not really a slot corner in my opinion. So Cooper Kupp against our slot corners, it's going to be crazy. Him and Matthew Stafford already have this great connection, so that scares me. And most importantly, Chris, the Giants pass rush. Where are they getting it from? Matthew Stafford, when given time, is going to destroy this team. The guy has a cannon for an arm. If they get behind this Giants defense, it's going to be over. I just don't know how we stop them on defense. Our defense is just, obviously very disappointing, but just not just disappointing. There's no pass rush, and I don't know how you're supposed to beat a Matthew Stafford-led team with no pass rush. It just, I don't know. Talk me out of it.
I mean, we're gonna have to get it. Leonard Williams is gonna have to wake up and play like he did last year, specifically in that Seattle game. If we're gonna have a chance to beat them and create some turnovers. But I mean, I'd be kidding myself and anybody watching this if I thought we're gonna beat the Rams. The Rams are a much better team, and we're banged up going in. But they play the games for a reason, and if we do win, well, then we'll start to feel a little bit differently about this Giants team. But it's gonna be tough. We don't even have our best weapon with Galladay. So, well, right now you could at least argue Tony's our best weapon. But we'll see. I'm obviously looking forward to the game like I am every week, but not going in with unrealistic expectations. I expect the Rams to win by at least 10 points, and we'll see.
Yeah, I refuse to let them get me disappointed because I was bummed out when they lost last week, and it was a crappy way too with all the injuries. Because
for me, Mike, I wasn't bummed out that they lost. I thought we would lose. I thought it'd be more competitive, and I still say, even though Will disagrees with me, it seems I do think it would have been a more competitive game had Jones not gotten hurt and Barkley and Galladay and everybody else. I think that game was much closer than the final score indicated. The Cowboys kind of ran it up at the end with the pick six, and I do think Jones would have kept that within maybe a touchdown or so with the Cowboys, but I never thought we were going to win. To me, what the deflating part of that game was all the injuries. That just took the wind out of my sails because I could have, like I said, I could have convinced myself, say they lose 31-24 or 34-27 or 34-30. I could have convinced myself the following week, okay, something to build off of. We went up against a better team and we played them relatively tough, and Jones is continuing to look good. This offense continuing to look good, and maybe at home we could beat the Rams, get to 2-4, which is where I had us anyway at the start of the year. But once all those injuries happened, man, I was just like, I don't know, man. It just took the wind out of my sails.
No, I completely get it. Yeah, I think coming into the game, I had a thought of like maybe we could win this game if things break right. But even after like Saquon went down, I just felt like this is going to be one of those Sunday afternoons where nothing goes right. And the Cowboys at that time were running for like 7 yards a clip, and I was just like, how do we win this game? Like I went from having like those expectations of we could win this game to like, how do we win this game within the first few minutes of the first quarter? So it was not a good look for me there, but it's,
when I knew we were in trouble, and obviously before the injuries, but once Lorenzo Carter got that interception, for us not to be able to move the ball at all on our first drive, that was such a momentum killer. Even if we got 3 there, that was backbreaking for us not to be able to capitalize on that turnover.
Yeah, and Joe Judge loves his 3 points, so we couldn't get that, unfortunately.
And even Goodell missed a kick too this week too.
Yeah, I'm not like concerned about him yet.
No, not at all.
I want to ask you because you're all over the news and stuff. Like not like literally all over the news, but like you're up to date with Giants news, of course. Why did they work out Michael Badgley and that other dude? What was the point of that?
Didn't they work out Rosas?
Yeah, Rosas. That's the other dude. Yeah, Rosas.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe for the practice squad. I honestly don't know, man. That's a good question, but I can't imagine to replace Gano. They're paying him a lot of money and coming over. I mean, he missed a 55-yarder. Like, come on, relax. I know I think he missed a 35-yarder the week before, right? So, but no, I would hope they weren't thinking about potentially. I think it was for the practice squad, maybe, because they had 2 kickers on their team last year. Remember, with what's his name, Santoso.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess that makes more. I was like concerned, like, what is Gano injured or like what's going on here? But
maybe they were worried about a potential injury. Who knows?
You think about it because he was just automatic and he's missed the last couple of weeks, so it kind of creeps in your mind of like, is something off here? But I don't know. Hopefully, as long as it doesn't have like a Mason Crosby type game, I think we'll be okay. So we'll see. Anyway, that's gonna do it, Chris. I appreciate you giving me all your time and everyone in the comments here and in the chat. Very active throughout the videos. I appreciate it. Of course, we were kind of like in our own zone here. It was me, you, and Will there for a while, so it's hard to kind of look at the chat sometimes and get to that. So anyway, I appreciate everyone for being here. It was kind of a last minute thing. I should have made more of an announcement. So anyone that was getting the notifications and joining here at the last minute, I appreciate you. And I guess Chris, we'll talk next week on your channel.
Yeah. Hopefully something good to talk about, and we're not continuing to talk about a 1-5 football team and think and forecasting for the future. And hopefully we get a win. Mike, I appreciate you having me on. Always love talking Giants, and looking forward to next week where hopefully we get to talk about something good. But I'm not going to get my hopes up. Like I said, I'm not trying to get fans' hopes up. I expect a loss, and if they win, I'll be pleasantly surprised and ecstatic. But it's gonna be a tough week this week.
Pleasantly surprised is a good way to put it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I want them to fight in this game. I don't want a 2017.
I think they will. I think they'll fight.
I hope.
They fought last week. They were just hurt, man.
Yeah.
I thought they fought last week.
Mhm.
A lot of I feel like there's a large portion of this fan base that just, and I understand it based off the way that Judge, some of the decisions he's made so far this year, that is just looking for any reason to bash Joe Judge. I don't think this past week was I saw a lot of people saying, they were trying. How could you bash Judge this week? In my opinion, at least,
Yeah.
his entire team got hurt. You tell me a team in the NFL where the quarterback goes down, the left tackle doesn't play, the two best weapons go down against a superior opponent on the road, and you tell me a team that's going to win that game. So I couldn't get on Joe Judge this week. I do think that the team actually fought pretty hard. The offense went out there and they tried their best with Mike Glennon out there. And I do think the defense gave it everything they had. They just couldn't stack up against that Cowboys offense. So, I will say that. I don't think the team quit. I don't expect them to quit this week either.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to bash Joe Judge for what happened even last week, but I think we can all agree Joe Judge has been underwhelming for the way we expected this year, which sucks. I did expect him to be. I had a tweet somewhere it's going to be a very cold take at some point. I said, I think it was somewhere along the lines of Joe Judge at the end of this year, 2021, is going to be known as a top 10 coach in the NFL. And I'm going to be eating my words on that one. But I did genuinely believe that Joe Judge was going to take a big step as a head coach. And it just kind of feels like it's gone backwards in a way. So very disappointing for a guy that obviously is not on the roster, but a guy that's very important to the Giants organization that we had a lot of faith and belief in. Like, I think mostly 98% of Giants fans were all in on Joe Judge. And now it seems like people are really jumping off the ship, and you're allowed to do that. I hate when people are like, oh, if you jump off the Daniel Jones train, you can't get back on. Like, you're allowed to be out on Joe Judge right now. Like, I completely understand it. It's justifiable. So I hope he improves. Of course, it's a tough situation, of course, with all the injuries that go on here. Not to make an excuse, but obviously the Giants don't have the best roster. Yes, they should be near a playoff team, and getting 5 or 6 wins is unacceptable this year. But it's not like Joe Judge has the best team and best situation in the world. I'll put it that way. Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to give him the rest of the year and hope he improves. I mean, there's definitely been, obviously the throwing the challenge flag when he knew he couldn't get, and his misusage of some of the timeouts, and coming into the year basically saying the first 3 games were an extension of preseason, like not things that you want to hear out of your head coach, and not off to the rosiest of starts, but there's a long year to, 12 more games, and we'll see how this team hopefully grows throughout the year. And, I still hope that Judge is back next year. I don't want to go through another coach. It's what the worst organizations do, and we'll see. But I completely understand Giants fans that are low on Joe Judge right now.
Yeah, there's no point in overreacting. Joe Judge is not getting fired midseason unless there's a John Gruden situation coming out here. But I think he'll last this year. I do believe that. As for Gettleman, don't know. I think Merritt will do him a solid and probably keep him the rest of the year, if I had to guess. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think if I had to guess. I think Gettleman will step down at the end of the year. I don't think he'll be fired. He'll retire. I don't really see, other than maybe you're scared that he's going to make a trade that to hurt the future of this team, but I really don't see that happening. I really don't. I don't think that they'll do that this year, but we'll see. I think he'll step down at the end of the year, and I don't really see other than making the fans happy. I don't really see the benefit to this year's roster with firing him at this point. You might as well. Maybe the one thing I will say though, Mike, is if your plan, and I don't know if this will be their plan, is to hire an outside GM and not hire from within, maybe it would be beneficial to move on by week 15 or so you could get a leg up on the competition. Looking for a GM, and I guess that'll be something that maybe might come into play as the year progresses.
Yeah, we'll see. I just don't expect that based on the relationship that Mara and Gettleman have.
I doubt it.
Exactly. So, I mean, we'll have to find out. Oh, Jalen Hurts throws a pick. How do you like that? All right. Anyway, let's end it up because I'm going to be on here all night with you. But anyway, thanks again, guys. I appreciate everyone being here. Check us out on Chris's channel next week. Search on the Entertainah. I'll probably forget to put his link in the description, but everyone knows who you are, so I'm sure they'll find you. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys next time.